Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Cori Desmond. Cori Desmond was born on March 18, 1980 at Torrance Memorial Hospital, where she immediately faced a life-or-death struggle due to a hole in her diaphragm. Despite the odds against her, Cori underwent multiple surgeries and defied a 20% chance of survival, not only recovering but thriving as well. Those who knew Cori described her as a bright, self-assured young woman who wasn't afraid to speak her mind. She was energetic, affectionate, and cared deeply for many people. After graduating from North Torrance High School, Cori earned a master's degree in criminal justice from Long Beach State. However, she later changed her mind and decided to pursue a teaching career. Sadly, Cori's life was cut short, but just a week after her passing, a notice arrived in the mail confirming that she had earned her teaching credential. Cori was loved by many and had a special gift for connecting with people. Cori had formed close bonds with her co-workers at various bars and restaurants, which made her want to continue working in the industry despite her family's disapproval. On Saturday, February 14, 2009, Cori finished her shift at a bar at 9:30 p.m. and walked 2 blocks to Street Lounge, a popular bar where many of her friends worked. Surveillance cameras captured her helping out her friends at the bar until it closed around 2 a.m. After that, none of her friends saw her again. 2 days later, on Monday, February 16th, at around 2:20 p.m., the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Office received a call from a driver who was about 100 miles away from the bar where Cori was last seen. The driver had stopped to remove snow chains from his tires when he noticed a strong, unpleasant odor. Initially, he thought it was from an animal that had been hit by a car, but he decided to investigate. A short distance from his car, he found a black plastic garbage bag containing a woman's body. Panicked, the driver ran into the road, flagging down cars and asking someone to call the police, as his phone was out of PIN. The victim, 28-year-old Cori Desmond, was identified through fingerprints and her driver's license. She had suffered a brutal attack, dying from strangulation, with multiple bruises on her face and neck, and head injuries. Despite her efforts to fight back, evident from defense wounds, she succumbed to the assault. Although the exact time of death couldn't be determined, experts estimated that Cori's body had been lying on the street for 12 to 36 hours before it was discovered. Notably, her pants were found unbuttoned and pulled down to her knees, but there was no evidence of sexual assault. Investigators concluded that the location where the body was found was not the site of the murder. The killer likely dumped Cori's body by the side of the road and hoping it would take time for it to be discovered. Before the police found her body, a rainstorm had washed away any potential evidence. Breaking the news to families of the deceased or missing is one of the toughest parts of a policeman's job. The news of Cori's body being discovered in a garbage bag was devastating for her grandmother, with whom Cori was living, and just as shocking for Mark, Cori's father. Mark was well aware of how the system worked and knew that investigations could be delayed for months due to the need for warrants for searches, interrogations, and fingerprinting. He also knew that bureaucratic red tape could slow down the process of solving a crime. Instead of waiting for the police to find Cori's killer, Mark decided to take matters into his own hands. Driven by his love for his daughter, Mark began searching for the person responsible. He discovered Cori's abandoned Jeep Wrangler in an alley near the bar where she worked. He also learned that Cori had gone missing on the night of February 15th, although no one had realized it at the time. Cori's grandmother hadn't been alarmed because Cori was an adult and could have stayed overnight at a friend's house. To piece together the events of the evening, investigators visited the bar where Cori worked as a waitress. They spoke with her co-workers, who revealed that Cori had finished her shift at 9:30 p.m. and then headed to another bar where her friends were working. This was a common routine for Cori. as she would often socialize with her friends and even lend a hand at the bar, earning extra tips in the process. Many regulars at the bar recognized Cori and thought she was a part of the staff. Security cameras confirmed this account, capturing footage of Cori assisting her friends behind the counter. However, on this evening, Cori's luck took a turn for the worse. She got into an argument with a drunk and disorderly man who was making inappropriate comments and inappropriately touching women. When a disruptive man showed up at the bar, Cori stood up for the other patrons and told him he wasn't welcome. The man became furious, but eventually agreed to leave. Cori went back to helping her friends and serving drinks as if nothing had happened, and even though she drank some alcohol that evening, it didn't seem to affect her behavior. After 2 a.m., Cori left the bar alone, planning to head home. But tragically, her body was found 100 miles away the next day. Mark helped the police by sharing any information he could find on TV and appealed to others to come forward with any crucial details. Meanwhile, the police identified the man who had gotten into a fight with Cori before her death. When questioned by investigators, the man claimed not to know Cori Desmond, but admitted to having a big fight with a woman at a bar on February 14th. He blamed his behavior on alcohol, saying it made him lose control, and confirmed that he was kicked out of the bar afterwards and went home to sleep. The man denied any involvement in the crime and agreed to take a polygraph test and let the police search his house and car. The investigators thoroughly searched the suspect's car, looking for any signs of evidence, such as bloodstains, hair, or personal belongings of Cori. Despite the car being dirty inside and out, forensic experts found nothing. They also searched his house, but found no indication of his involvement in the crime. The police then turned to a polygraph test as their last hope to catch the suspect, but he passed it easily, answering all their questions. His wife corroborated his alibi, stating that he returned home before 2 a.m. and went straight to bed. Since Cori left the bar around 2 a.m., it seemed clear that this man was not involved in her death. Consequently, the police removed him from their list of suspects, but they were left with no other leads or persons of interest in the investigation. Investigators looked into her personal life to see if she had any enemies who might have wanted to harm her. They discovered a strange detail. Cori had stopped by the bar where she worked to ask to use the restroom, but the owner refused since the bar was closed and told her to go home. This was around 2:20 a.m., but what happened after that remains unknown because Cori never got in her car and didn't go home. The investigators thought that Cori might have been abducted or attacked near her workplace, but the bar's security cameras didn't capture anything, and there were no witnesses on the street at that late hour. When Cori died, her blood alcohol level was more than 4 times the legal limit for driving, but it's unclear whether she was planning to drive or looking for another way to get home. Unfortunately, Cori didn't encounter anyone who could help her that night. A month into the investigation, the police had checked all leads and found no new suspects, reaching a dead end. However, Cori's father, Mark, was not ready to give up. He rented 3 billboards on Aria Boulevard in Redondo Beach. Information about Cori was displayed on 50 electronic billboards, which eventually led to a breakthrough in the case. In May 2009, the police received a call from a woman named Tiffany who had seen Cori's photo on one of the billboards. Tiffany's tip helped the police solve the case. She was clearly nervous and upset, speaking quietly and rambling at first. However, she eventually composed herself and explained that she thought her boyfriend, Tony Lopez Perez, might have killed Cori Desmond. She added that he had been acting strangely and that she would like to talk to them more about it in person. Tiffany arranged to meet with the detective in a park where she shared her suspicions. She told him that on Valentine's Day, she and Tony had planned a romantic dinner. She spent the evening getting ready, dropping off her kids at her parents' house, getting her hair done, and buying a new red dress, which Tony particularly liked. Tony was working that day, but was supposed to come home around 11:30 p.m. Tiffany waited up for Tony all night, but he didn't respond to her calls and messages. When he finally returned home at 4:30 a.m., he claimed to be too drunk to drive and said he had fallen asleep in his car. Tiffany found this suspicious, especially since Tony rarely cleaned his car, but afterwards, he suddenly bought cleaning products and washed the car thoroughly, refusing her help. A few days later, Tony sold his white Dodge for a low price and bought a new car without explanation. He also changed his phone number for no apparent reason. On their trip to Big Bear Lake, Tony's behavior seemed normal at first, but then he stopped the car and asked Tiffany if she thought the body of a murdered bartender had been dumped there. He seemed certain that the police had found her body in that exact location. Tony Lopez Perez and Tiffany had lived together for about 4 years and had a 6-year-old son, but they were never married. Tony was a hard-working and well-liked man with no criminal record. He came from a large family with 8 siblings, and his parents had grown up in the LA area. Tony had attended high school in Manhattan Beach. However, after Cori Desmond's death, Tiffany began to notice some suspicious behavior from Tony. He was absent on the day of Cori's death, and later he was seen cleaning his car urgently and trying to sell it quickly. He also made a strange comment about where the police found Cori's body. Additionally, he changed his phone number and displayed odd behavior. When Tiffany connected these dots, she realized that Tony might be involved in Cori's death. She was hesitant to believe it, but she agreed to cooperate with the investigators. They decided to interview Tony at his house, making it seem like a routine witness inquiry into Cori's case. Tiffany played along, not revealing to Tony that she suspected him. During the interview, Tony appeared calm and composed, answering questions without showing any nervousness. He claimed he didn't know Cori, saying he had only seen her in the newspapers. To gather enough evidence to arrest Tony Lopez Perez for Cori's murder, the police needed concrete proof. They tracked down the new owner of the Dodge that Tony had sold quickly after Cori's death was reported. The new owner confirmed that Tony had sold him the car at a suspiciously low price and allowed the police to search the vehicle for clues. Tiffany revealed that Tony had thoroughly cleaned the interior before selling it, but the police discovered something incriminating when they used luminol and an ultraviolet lamp to examine the car. This revealed why Tony had been to get rid of his car. The police arrested Tony and took him to the station, without revealing what they had discovered. Initially, Tony denied knowing Cori, but later changed his story, claiming he had seen her outside a bar and whistled at her. However, when the police showed him photos of a car he had sold, which contained crucial evidence, Tony's story changed again. This time, Tony claimed that Cori had become unconscious on the sidewalk outside the bar. He said he tried to help her, but she woke up screaming and told him to leave her alone. Tony alleged that, in fear, he covered her mouth and accidentally strangled her. Panicked that he would be blamed for Cori's death, Tony placed her body in the back seat of his car and drove home. He said he woke up in the middle of the night, checked on the body, and realized it wasn't just a nightmare. The next morning, Tony went to work with Cori's body still in the car. After his shift, he put the body in 2 garbage bags and abandoned it in a remote area. Tony claimed that he accidentally strangled Cori while drunk and scared, but the evidence suggested otherwise. Cori's injuries were severe, including head wounds, facial and neck bruises, and defensive wounds on her hands. Her pants were also found down to her knees, implying a more deliberate and violent act. Tony was arrested and charged with first-degree deprivation of life. He led the police to Cori's body the next day. The investigation produced DNA evidence, which matched Cori's blood to blood found in the car Tony sold shortly after the crime. At the 2011 trial, Coroner Jack Sheridan testified to the extent of Cori's injuries, including multiple head contusions, signs of strangulation, and blunt force trauma to her face. He also found scratches on her body, indicating that the killer had dragged her after death. Prosecutors argued that Tony had assaulted Cori, attempting to force her into sexual intimacy in the early morning of February 15, 2009. When Cori resisted, Tony strangled her. Tiffany Ware, a former girlfriend of Tony's, testified at the trial, revealing that Tony had an insatiable appetite for sex in January and February 2009. Despite their frequent daily sexual encounters, Perez remained unsatisfied. Additionally, Tiffany revealed to the court that Tony had forced himself on her without her consent on 2 separate occasions. These incidents took place about a month apart, shortly after the birth of their son. On both occasions, Tiffany was unconscious on the couch, having taken painkillers for severe back pain. Perez spoke to the court for the first time during his sentencing. He acknowledged that he had strayed from the values of love and respect he was taught, which normally made him a caring father, uncle, and family provider. He admitted that he failed to live up to these principles and fell short. Perez largely stuck to the version of events presented by his lawyer, Andrew Hanel, during the trial. According to Hanel, Perez found the victim, Cori, unconscious on the sidewalk and tried to calm her down, but didn't intend to harm her. Perez expressed regret, saying that he should have taken a moment to think before acting. Instead, he let fear take over and acted carelessly. Cori's father, Mark Desmond, mourned the loss of his 28-year-old daughter, who had a promising future ahead of her. He condemned Perez, saying that he not only took Cori's life, but also crushed the hopes and dreams of his own children. Mark Desmond described Perez as embodying the characteristics that women often fear in society. Before being sentenced, Perez asked God in court to show him mercy and apologized to both the Desmond family and his own family for causing them harm. He acknowledged that his actions would have a lasting impact on the Desmond family's lives. Desmond's grandmother, Beverly, expressed her desire for Perez to never be released from prison and to suffer as much as her granddaughter had. In July 2011, a jury found Tony Lopez Perez guilty of first-degree deprivation of life, resulting in a life imprisonment sentence with the possibility of parole after 25 years. Cori Desmond's family thanked Tiffany, whose information helped the police solve the case. A family friend, Leslie Schwab, attended the trial and credited Tiffany with helping the police catch Perez, saying that without her, they might not have identified him as the perpetrator. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Mindy Morgenstern. Mindy Morgenstern was born on April 29, 1984, in Bogota, Colombia. She was adopted by Eunice and Larry Morgenstern, farmers from New Salem, North Dakota, USA, who already had a biological daughter named Rebecca. They had previously adopted a boy named Michael, and then, 10 years later, they adopted April, also from Colombia. When they discovered April had a younger sister, Mindy, they adopted her as well, making her their 4th child and 3rd adopted child. Growing up on the farm was ideal for Mindy. She enjoyed horseback riding, playing basketball, and helping her parents with farm work, including driving a tractor. After graduating from high school, Mindy left New Salem and moved to Valley City, where she thrived in student life. Her outgoing and cheerful personality quickly helped her make many new friends. Mindy was a dedicated student who balanced her studies with a part-time job as a waitress at a local restaurant. It seemed like she was on the verge of achieving her goals, but her life took a devastating turn. Mindy's friends and family noticed that she was unreachable on September 13, 2006, which was unusual because she was always quick to respond to calls and messages. Concerned about her whereabouts, her friends Tony and Danielle decided to visit her apartment to check on her. When they arrived, they saw her car parked in the lot, which indicated that she was likely at home. Danielle waited in the car while Tony went up to Mindy's 2nd-floor apartment. Despite knocking on the door, there was no response. Tony entered the dark apartment, stumbled upon a disturbing sight, and turned on the light to reveal Mindy's body with neck injuries. Overcome with shock, Tony ran outside to inform Danielle, still waiting in the car. Mindy's friends entered her apartment but they were met with a disturbing scene. Mindy's neck had knife wounds, and an empty bottle of cleaning agent lay nearby, its strong smell permeating the air. Danielle quickly called 911 to report the discovery of her friend's body. As they waited for help to arrive, a neighbor from the same floor, who had been alerted by the noise, came to investigate. He approached Mindy, checked her pulse, and sadly announced that she had passed away. Soon after, the police arrived at the apartment. Upon entering, the detectives were immediately struck by the overpowering smell of the cleaning agent. They found Mindy's body lying in the living room, with a belt wrapped around her neck and a broken knife protruding from it. The handle of the murder weapon was found next to Mindy's body. In an attempt to destroy evidence, the killer used a cleaning agent, but forensic experts still managed to find crucial evidence, including skin particles under Mindy's left-hand fingernails, indicating that she fought back against her attacker. As investigators searched for a motive, they quickly dismissed the possibility of a robbery gone wrong. Mindy's purse, phone, wallet, and cash were all still present, untouched, and her jewelry remained unaffected. It seemed that the attacker's intentions were not financially driven. The presence of a basket of clean laundry near Mindy's body suggested that she was attacked immediately after entering her apartment. Furthermore, there were no signs of forced entry on the front door, implying that the killer either knew Mindy or entered the apartment shortly after she did. The next day, the detectives informed the Morgenstern family that Mindy had passed away. The news brought grief to her parents, brother, and sisters. The family was confused, as Mindy was well liked by everyone and had no known enemies. Her friends had no history of trouble with the law. Mindy's friends, Tony and Danielle, revealed to investigators that they were not alone in the apartment. A neighbor from the same floor had entered Mindy's apartment after hearing their screams. He attempted to check Mindy's pulse, pronouncing her dead. When questioned, the neighbor explained that he had used the back of his hand to avoid leaving his fingerprints on Mindy's wrist. When questioned about the scratches, Robert Lind claimed they were work-related injuries, explaining that his job working with steel often left him with scratches. He said he had been at work from 7 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. the previous day. The investigators verified his alibi by contacting his employer, who confirmed Robert's schedule and explained that scratches were a common occupational hazard. Despite this, the investigators remained skeptical and asked Robert to provide a DNA sample, which he willingly supplied. To aid in their investigation, the police sent a sample to the lab to compare it with the one found under Mindy's fingernails. They also questioned all of Mindy's friends, but no leads came from these interviews. Everyone claimed that Mindy didn't have any conflicts with anyone. While waiting for DNA results, investigators questioned Mindy's neighbors, including Mo Gibbs, a corrections officer from Barnes County Jail, hoping his professional insight might reveal something others missed. Gibbs claimed to have served in the Navy from 1990 to 1999, but was discharged due to an assault conviction and prison sentence. After release, he had no further legal issues. A former college security guard, Gibbs worked the night shift before Mindy's death. Next morning, Gibbs packed boxes into the car, preparing to move with his family. He noticed a strong smell of cleaning agent, but didn't investigate, being too busy with the move. Mo Gibbs had scratches on his hands, which he attributed to carrying boxes. When questioned about visiting Mindy Morgenstern's apartment, he claimed to have been there only once to help her carry a laundry basket. Investigators requested a DNA sample from Gibbs, which he readily provided. After collecting the sample, the police released Gibbs. They then spoke with Mindy's co-workers at the restaurant where she worked, seeking information about anyone who might have known her well. They discovered that a frequent visitor, Ralph, who lived in a nearby trailer, made Mindy uneasy. The police decided to question Ralph, who denied knowing Mindy or having any conflicts with anyone at the restaurant. Ralph didn't have a solid alibi, but he did provide a DNA sample, which was sent to the lab for analysis along with the other evidence. The detectives then turned their attention to Mindy's boyfriend, Jordan Ram. Like Mindy, Jordan came from a local farming family, and they had been together for over a year. They met at church, where they were regular attendees. Jordan had a clean record and was well liked in the community. He appeared to be deeply committed to Mindy, often taking her to spend time with his family. However, Mindy's parents mentioned that Jordan would sometimes show up at their farm uninvited, asking Mindy to leave with him. This behavior hinted at jealousy, but Eunice and Larry didn't think he was capable of harming their daughter. The police asked Jordan to come in for questioning, and he readily agreed. During the interview, Jordan cooperated fully and answered questions honestly, trying to help the investigators in any way he could. Jordan claimed to have seen Mindy the day before she died, when they went shopping and visited a video rental store. The next day, Mindy called him at 10:45 a.m., which was the day she died. This was unusual because Mindy normally called Jordan around 10 times a day, but on this day, she didn't call again or respond to his attempts to reach out. Jordan told the police about his whereabouts at the time of Mindy's death, saying he was working on his family's farm. He agreed to provide a DNA sample and take a polygraph test, but his results were inconclusive due to his anxiety. The police let him go and sent his DNA sample to the lab while they checked his alibi. However, Jordan wasn't the only person in Mindy's life who raised suspicions. Kyle Kia, Mindy's ex-boyfriend, was another potential suspect. They had broken up over a year before her death, but something strange happened after their breakup. Kyle was the love of Mindy's life, and they had been together for 2.5 years. Kyle's family had loved him, and Mindy thought she would marry him one day. After their breakup, Kyle moved to a new place about an hour away from Valley City. Mindy was worried that Kyle would find someone else, which led to their breakup. According to Kyle, he ended the relationship because he needed to move on with his life. Mindy tried to win him back, but Kyle had already started seeing someone else and stopped communicating with her. About 7 months before her death, Mindy visited Kyle's house to talk, but he told her to leave. They hadn't spoken since then. When questioned by investigators, Kyle expressed regret over how he had treated Mindy. Kyle also revealed that Mindy had been in touch with his father, Rodney Kia, which was unusual. Mindy's friends said Rodney would call her several times a day, sometimes just a few times a week. Kyle thought his father was too attached to Mindy and had even asked him to stop contacting her. Rodney's wife was upset about the situation, as he was married. The police found a voicemail message from Rodney on Mindy's phone, left after her death, in which he apologized and cried. The police found the close relationship between Rodney and Mindy suspicious and brought him in for questioning. Rodney admitted his attachment to Mindy was strange, triggered when she dated Kyle and reminded him of his young wife. They started talking about Kyle, then discussed other topics, frequently texting even after his wife found out. Mindy often initiated conversations, sometimes up to 20 times a week. Rodney, who considered Mindy like a daughter, was shocked when he heard about her tragic fate. He left an emotional voicemail for the investigators, which, although sincere, didn't dispel their suspicions. In fact, it's possible that he became obsessively fixated on her. Despite his denials, Rodney provided his DNA to the police and accounted for his whereabouts on the day of Mindy's death, claiming he worked on the farm with his 2 sons from 7:30 a.m. until evening. His family corroborated his alibi, and the investigators released him. Meanwhile, the police sent his DNA sample to the lab for comparison with the skin particles found under Mindy's fingernails. Just as the investigation seemed stalled, a DNA analysis revealed a connection to a similar attack that had occurred in Fargo, 75 miles away, 2 years prior. In that case, a woman had been attacked and forced to make contact with her assailant. The DNA sample from the Fargo case matched the one found under Mindy's fingernails, suggesting that the same perpetrator was responsible for both crimes. The police investigating Mindy's case met with the Fargo victim to gather more information about her attacker. She recounted being drugged at a bar, waking up in an unfamiliar apartment, and barely escaping her attacker. She described him as a muscular African-American man, over 6 feet tall and weighing over 200 pounds. The police had previously entered the attacker's DNA into the federal database, but it had gone unmatched for 2 years. Now, with the new connection, they had a lead. After analyzing multiple DNA samples, the lab finally found a match: 34-year-old Mo Gibbs, a corrections officer at the Barnes County Jail, who had voluntarily provided his DNA sample. Detectives called Gibbs in for questioning, keeping him under surveillance in case he tried to flee. At the police station, they asked him to take a polygraph test, which he agreed to, but the results indicated he was lying. Gibbs denied any involvement in Mindy's death, remaining calm even after learning his DNA linked him to the case. However, the evidence was enough to arrest him and charge him with Mindy's murder. After Gibbs's arrest, 5 female prisoners came forward, accusing him of forcing them into intimate relations while he was on duty. As a result, he faced 6 additional charges. It was discovered that Gibbs had changed his name, previously being Glendale Morgan Jr. while serving in the Navy. He had been involved in a drive-by shooting and spent over 5 years in prison. Gibbs pleaded guilty to all charges except those related to Mindy's death. His defense claimed that his DNA was under Mindy's fingernails because she touched the same door handle as him, but the prosecution believed he entered her apartment, forced her into intimacy, and then killed her when she resisted. The judge deemed the evidence against Gibbs to be overwhelming and sentenced him to life imprisonment without parole. Gibbs also received additional sentences of 12 years for assault and 15 years for related charges. Although Mindy's mother publicly forgave Gibbs, she made it clear that she would never forget what he did to her daughter. Gibbs is currently serving his... Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jaden Parkinson. Jaden Parkinson was born on September 26, 1996, in Folkestone, UK, as the youngest of 3 siblings in a troubled family. Her parents' relationship was marked by discord. Jaden's mother, Samantha, recounts that her children were exposed to unsettling experiences. When Jaden was just 7 years old, her parents divorced, and she initially lived with her father. Despite this, she maintained a close bond with her mother, with whom she would talk every night over the phone. As Jaden entered her teenage years, her lifestyle became increasingly turbulent. According to Samantha, Jaden's father gave her excessive freedom, which led to her involvement with a crowd that encouraged smoking and alcohol consumption. Jaden would periodically live with her father and then with her mother. At the age of 13, she ran away from home, seeking refuge with her mother and expressing a desire to live with her. Ultimately, the family court ruled in favor of Jaden's wish, allowing her to stay with her mother. Jaden had a difficult time at school, often clashing with teachers and resenting attempts to control her behavior. In her personal life, she was in a romantic relationship with Ben Blakely, whom she met at 14. Despite their significant age difference, Ben was 20, Jaden's mother was unable to intervene. Initially, Jaden and Ben's relationship was loving and romantic, but it gradually became strained and controlling. Ben exerted significant influence over Jaden's life, dictating her appearance, including what clothes she wore and whether she wore makeup. He also isolated her from her family and friends, causing Jaden to move out of her mother's house and into a hostel for women escaping domestic violence. Ben exerted total control over Jaden's life, despite being banned from her hostel. They frequently argued, and the hostel staff were even warned about Ben's aggressive behavior towards her. Jaden was trapped, needing his permission to do anything. Ben took away her phone, convincing her that she only needed him and his love. Ben dictated who Jaden could talk to, forbidding her from interacting with men. He monitored her social media, and she eventually stopped attending school. His grip on her life was so tight that he even restricted her from leaving her room to use the toilet. Jaden's daily phone calls with her mother dwindled to just 1 or 2 conversations per month. Jaden's mother, Samantha, pleaded with her to return home and end the toxic relationship, but Jaden refused. Ben's control over Jaden was both psychological and physical. She was often seen with bruises on her face. On November 30th, 2013, Jaden called her mother to reveal that she was pregnant. Jaden hoped that having a child would change Ben's attitude towards her and his lifestyle for the better. She thought the baby would bring them closer together and that Ben would go back to being the person she fell in love with. However, Ben did not live up to her expectations. Instead, he revealed his true nature once he had complete control over Jaden. He manipulated her into isolating herself from her friends and family, making her financially dependent on him. He even went so far as to restrict her movements, not allowing her to leave her room, even to use the toilet. Meanwhile, Ben was dating other girls behind her back, controlling them psychologically and physically as well. When Jaden's mother, Samantha, found out about her pregnancy, she asked Jaden to come back home, but Jaden refused, not wanting to cause her mother any more trouble. When Jaden told Ben about her pregnancy, he became angry and denied being the father of her child. Before she vanished, Jaden was being threatened by Ben, who claimed he would post intimate photos and videos of her on social media. In the days leading up to her disappearance, Jaden reported Ben to the authorities, fearing he would follow through on his threat. At the time, Ben possessed 30 explicit photos and 13 videos of Jaden, which she desperately wanted to keep private. On December 3rd, Jaden failed to return to her hostel, prompting staff to launch a search. Given their awareness of Jaden's personal issues, they contacted her mother, Samantha, by phone, but she was unable to provide any information about her daughter's whereabouts. A missing persons report was filed with the police just after midnight on December 4th, 2013. After learning about Jaden's tumultuous personal life, investigators reached out to Ben to see if he had any information about her disappearance. However, he was hostile and hung up on them multiple times, claiming he couldn't assist and had no idea where Jaden might be. Jaden had a troubled upbringing and frequently clashed with her family, even running away from home on several occasions. Given this history, her initial disappearance didn't raise immediate red flags during the investigation. On December 4th, police arrested Ben Blakely, but it wasn't related to Jaden's disappearance. Instead, Jaden had previously reported Ben to the police, fearing he would post intimate photos of her online. The investigators who spoke with Ben were unaware that he was also a person of interest in Jaden's disappearance case. After being arrested, Ben denied plans to share Jaden's photos online and was released on bail that same day. Samantha, Jaden's mother, took action by distributing flyers with her daughter's picture and using social media to raise awareness about her disappearance, hoping someone had information about her whereabouts. Meanwhile, the police reviewed surveillance footage to track Jaden's last known movements. They obtained CCTV footage from her hostel, which showed her leaving to meet Ben, but not returning. This was on December 3rd. Further investigation revealed that Jaden was next spotted at Oxford railway station, where CCTV footage captured her walking in with Ben. The footage didn't show anything suspicious. By tracing their journey, investigators discovered that Ben and Jaden took a train to Didcot, a town about 10 miles from Oxford. The last known location of Jaden was at the train station in Didcot, where footage showed her and Ben exiting the building. Jaden would typically reach out to her family within a day or two after running away from home to let them know she was safe. However, this time was different. Despite the passing days, Jaden failed to contact her family or friends, and her social media accounts remained inactive. The CCTV footage showing her boarding a train with Ben made him the prime suspect in her disappearance. The police were convinced that Ben knew Jaden's whereabouts and what had happened to her. The footage also revealed Ben returning to the train station alone, but Jaden was never seen alive again. On December 10, 2013, a week after her disappearance, the police arrested Ben Blakely. The investigators wanted to question Ben to determine what had happened to Jaden after they left the train station in Didcot together. At the time, the police considered two possibilities. Jaden might be hiding, or Ben could be holding her against her will. During the interrogation, Ben was very confident in his responses. He claimed to have no knowledge of his ex-girlfriend Jaden's whereabouts, stating that they had broken up and she had moved on to a new relationship. According to Ben, the police should focus their investigation on her new boyfriend. Ben showed a lack of concern for Jaden's safety, saying he didn't care what happened to her now that they were no longer together and he had a new girlfriend. He suggested that the police check her social media accounts to track her location and identify who she was interacting with. Despite Jaden still being missing, Ben was arrested on suspicion of kidnapping and murder. The police then interviewed Jaden's friends to see if they had any information about her possible whereabouts. However, their investigations revealed that Jaden had become estranged from her friends after starting her relationship with Ben, and therefore, no one knew of a potential hideout. A crucial break in the search for Jaden came when a taxi driver from Didcot contacted investigators. He reported that on December 4th, around 1 a.m., he picked up a young man on a dirt road who was struggling with a large, heavy suitcase covered in mud. The passenger needed help lifting the bag into the taxi, which raised the driver's suspicions about its contents and whether he might have unknowingly witnessed a crime. Further investigation revealed that the passenger had called the taxi using Ben Blakely's mobile phone. When police questioned Ben about this new evidence, he refused to answer any more questions. Analysis of his phone's location records showed that Ben had been to several locations in Didcot, including an abandoned barn in the countryside, which became a key area of interest in the case. The team of investigators, comprising criminologists and dog handlers, visited the location where a taxi had picked up Ben that night to conduct an investigation. It was later discovered that Ben and Jaden had previously been to this area, as Jaden's mother resided in Didcot, which is located near the barn. The police discovered a bracelet similar to Jaden's near the barn. Trained service dogs reacted as if they'd found a body inside, but Jaden's body wasn't there. This led the police to suspect that a suitcase, possibly containing Jaden's body, was involved. The police asked the public to come forward if they'd seen a man carrying a large suitcase in the Didcot area. Meanwhile, they conducted door-to-door interviews with nearby residents. Surveillance footage from the train station showed that Ben and Jaden didn't have a suitcase with them. Investigators were determined to find out where Ben got the suitcase, but they also considered the possibility that the man seen with the suitcase by the taxi driver wasn't actually Ben. On December 14th, the police found a crucial lead in their investigation. Ben Blakely's grandmother, grandfather, and younger brother Jake lived near the abandoned barn where the mysterious events unfolded. When the police arrived at their doorstep, Ben's grandmother immediately asked, "Are you here about the suitcase?" The grandmother explained that Ben had borrowed a suitcase from her a few days prior, hurriedly emptying its contents on the floor without explanation. He returned the suitcase 2 days later, but it was dirty. Additionally, she reported that 2 shovels had gone missing and reappeared, covered in a thick layer of dirt. The presence of the dirt-covered shovels raised suspicions that Ben may not have acted alone. Moreover, Jake, Ben's 17-year-old brother, was revealed to be a friend of Jaden's, which hinted at a potential connection between they. Witnesses reported seeing Ben and Jake riding dirt bikes together around the time the police were searching for Jaden. The police arrested Jake Blakely on suspicion of being involved in the crime. They sent the suitcase Ben had returned to his grandmother's barn to a laboratory for analysis to see if it had any traces of Jaden's DNA. Based on the evidence, investigators developed a theory that Jaden was killed in an abandoned barn then placed in a suitcase and taken to another location where she was buried. However, searching the vast fields surrounding Didcot made finding her body a daunting task. To aid in the investigation, the police used aerial photography to identify 10 areas where the soil surface had recently been disturbed. They checked several locations, but didn't find Jaden's body until they had searched all 10 areas of interest. A significant development occurred in the case when Jake Blakely began cooperating with the police. He directed them to investigate his uncle's grave at a local cemetery in Didcot, near the All Saints Church. Although the cemetery was one of 10 locations that had recently shown signs of surface disturbance, it was initially considered a low priority since such changes are not unusual in a cemetery setting. However, after receiving a note from Jake Blakely suggesting that Jaden's body might be buried in his uncle's grave, the police cordoned off the cemetery. This was a completely new and unprecedented tactic in hiding a victim's body, and it drew widespread media attention. Ben and Jake Blakely's uncle had been buried in 2006, and the forensic team set up a tent in the cemetery to conduct their investigation. After some time, they made the grim discovery. Jaden's body was found in the grave, naked, with no clothes or jewelry present. This was the first time in the country that a victim's body had been hidden in an existing grave. An examination by forensic experts revealed that Jaden was beaten before her death, with evidence of strangulation and finger marks on her neck. The official cause of death was asphyxia, as determined by the pathologist. While in prison awaiting trial, Ben Blakely had a change of heart after speaking with the prison chaplain. He wrote a letter, along with his lawyer, admitting responsibility for Jaden's death. Ben claimed that the crime was not planned, stating that he pushed Jaden during an argument, causing her to fall from a nearby bridge. He attempted to revive her but was unsuccessful. Initially, he buried her body in one location, but later moved it to his uncle's grave in the cemetery. However, the autopsy contradicted his story, showing blunt force injuries to her face and asphyxia as the cause of death, with no signs of a fall from a height. It meant Ben Blakely was dishonest to avoid responsibility for his actions. However, the truth came to light during the trial, which started on June 23, 2014, after Jaden's father had passed away due to heart problems. Blakely showed no remorse for taking the lives of Jaden and her unborn child. Instead, he behaved defiantly, shouting insults and displaying his indifference. Throughout the 4-week trial, it became clear that Blakely was a violent and controlling boyfriend. 3 of his ex-girlfriends testified that he had been abusive to them, taking their phones, hitting them, and choking them if they answered back, or if he suspected them of cheating. Blakely's short temper was on full display during the trial. He frequently outbursted in anger, using foul language in the courtroom and shouting at the prosecutor, Richard Leam. The judge repeatedly warned him about his behavior, but it was too much for Jaden's mother and other family members who were often forced to leave the courtroom in tears. Judge Patrick Eccles was shocked by Ben's behavior, so he sent him to the cells and continued the trial without him for a day. Although Jake Blakely is under 18, Judge Eccles allowed his name to be published because it was in the public's best interest. Jake has admitted to trying to disrupt the legal process, but claimed he thought he was burying weapons or dead animals at the time. Ben promised his sibling Jake an Xbox and £100 to commit the crime. CCTV footage showed Ben and Jaden taking a train to Didcot, then Jake returning alone, hiding his face. The prosecutor said it was a planned crime, with Jake luring Jaden to a secluded spot to kill him. Blakely took Jaden to an abandoned barn in another town after finding out she was pregnant, likely because he wanted to control her and didn't want to become a father. Jaden wanted to start a new life, but Blakely wouldn't let her go. Jaden's mother, Samantha, supported creating a domestic violence registry in an interview with Sky News. She recalled how Blakely manipulated and controlled Jaden, getting money from her, and said she thought she was his target, not Jaden. The jury deliberated for 20 hours before reaching a verdict. Ben Blakely was guilty of intentionally killing Jaden Parkinson. The judge emphasized that Jake Blakely's abusive behavior towards Jaden involved physical and emotional mistreatment during their relationship. Blakely controlled every aspect of Jaden's daily life, taking away her phone to isolate her from others. When she was living at a hostel, he forced her to stay in her room, even restricting her access to the bathroom. The judge pointed out that Jaden was deeply emotionally attached to Blakely, making it challenging for her to break free from the toxic relationship. Finally, in November last year, Jaden found the courage to end the relationship. In response, Blakely threatened to post intimate photos of her online to humiliate her. The court sentenced Jake Blakely to 3 years in prison for attempting to pervert the course of justice in July 2014. His older brother, Ben Blakely, received a life sentence with a minimum term of 20 years. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Amanda Plass. Amanda Lynn Plass was born on December 11, 1990, in Choppy, Massachusetts, where she grew up with her sister Emily and brother Nicholas. Her mother, Michelle Myers, described Amanda as a free-spirited individual who often seemed out of place in the present time. In 2011, Amanda was working as a waitress at a local restaurant in Choppy and was in a relationship with a 27-year-old carpenter named Seth Green. Tragedy struck on August 26, 2011. Seth called 911 and reported that he had found Amanda lying unresponsive in the kitchen of her apartment. When police and paramedics arrived, they found that Amanda was already deceased from multiple stab wounds to her chest, throat, and abdomen. The scene was immediately cordoned off and investigations were initiated. Seth was found sitting on the porch, visibly distressed and emotional. Detectives carefully searched Amanda's apartment for evidence, but the perpetrator had managed to escape the scene. The investigation was ongoing, with the goal of identifying the person responsible for Amanda's murder and bringing them to justice. Detectives began their investigation at the crime scene, where they found a significant amount of blood splatter in the kitchen, indicating that this was where the attack occurred. The evidence suggested that a knife was the likely murder weapon, and it was taken by the perpetrator. Further analysis revealed visible shoe prints from Nike sneakers on the floor and broken window glass, bearing a palm print in one of the rooms. Given the type and number of wounds on Amanda's body, detectives suspected that the perpetrator was someone Amanda knew, and the motive was likely a personal vendetta. As a result, they brought Amanda's boyfriend, Seth Green, in for questioning at the police station. When Seth arrived at the police station, he appeared visibly shaken, overcome with emotion over the loss of his girlfriend. The investigators were interested in determining his emotional response. During the interrogation, Seth explained that he had spent the entire day at work and had planned to give Amanda a ride to her workplace, but was unable to do so due to his own work schedule. Seth had a limited relationship with Amanda, but he loved her and had no motive to harm her. As a carpenter, Seth used various tools at work, including a knife on his tool belt. However, he consistently left his tools at work after his shift, and this day was no exception. After finishing his work, Seth changed his clothes, left his tools behind, and went to meet Amanda. He understood why he was the main suspect, but he denied any involvement in her death. The police investigation confirmed Seth's alibi, and he passed a polygraph test. Additionally, the boots he was wearing when the police arrived didn't match the Nike sneakers found at the crime scene, further ruling out his involvement. Amanda's tragic death led to a complex investigation. Initially, the police explored the possibility that her ex-boyfriend was involved, but further inquiry ruled him out as a suspect. He provided a DNA sample and fingerprints, which did not match the evidence found at the crime scene. Moreover, he had a solid alibi, eliminating him from the list of potential perpetrators. The family's pain deepened when they found out that some police officers had taken photos of Amanda's body while the state police were on their way to the crime scene. These officers shared the disturbing images with other officers and civilians, breaking the family's trust with the authorities and adding to their emotional pain. The case remained stagnant for approximately 2 years until investigators decided to review the evidence again. During this review, a crucial clue was discovered on a dry erase board in Amanda's bedroom. The message, "Dennis was here 8/11, had gone unnoticed until then. Considering the date, this message became significant. It was just 15 days before Amanda's body was discovered in her apartment. The revelation sparked questions. Who was Dennis, and was he connected to Amanda's death? The police had not come across this name throughout the entire investigation. Detectives analyzed Amanda's phone records and social media posts to see if she had any connections to someone named Dennis. Amanda's ex-boyfriend reported to the police that her apartment had been broken into several times when she was not home. Amanda suspected a young man whose name started with the letter D. She knew this man and wanted to resolve the issue peacefully, so she decided to talk to him first. During their meeting, Amanda tried to discuss the break-ins, but the man denied any involvement. When Amanda mentioned that a neighbor had seen him in her apartment, she politely asked him to return her stolen belongings. However, the man left. The investigation then focused on identifying the man named Dennis, who was suspected of being involved in Amanda's death. The police found a man named Dennis Rosa Roman living 3 blocks from the scene of the crime. A background check revealed that Dennis had a history of breaking and entering. Although there was no palm print to match the one found at Amanda's home, the police still wanted to question Dennis. They located him in Westfield, Massachusetts, and invited him to the station for an informal conversation. However, Dennis declined the invitation. But in November 2013, Dennis voluntarily visited the police station. The police questioned Dennis about his relationship with Amanda, and he acknowledged knowing her from Chappie, but claimed he hadn't seen her in a couple of years, which was true since Amanda had been deceased for a couple of years. When asked if he had ever visited Amanda's apartment, Dennis denied ever being there and stated that he didn't know her well. He admitted to occasionally selling weed to Amanda, which was how they occasionally interacted. During the interrogation, Dennis agreed to provide a DNA swab and revealed the size of his shoes, which matched the one found at the crime scene. However, the police noted that Dennis's Nike Air Max shoes had a different tread pattern than the ones that left bloody tracks at the crime scene. After providing his DNA, Dennis refused to answer further questions, promising to return to the police station in a few days to continue the conversation. Initially, the police didn't have sufficient grounds to arrest Dennison, so he was released. This decision was made despite concerns that he might flee and hinder the investigation. Further investigation revealed that Amanda and Dennis had made several phone calls to each other on July 28, 2011. The phone records showed that Amanda initiated 4 calls, while Dennis initiated 5 calls. When Dennis returned to the police station a few days later, his story changed. He now claimed that he had communicated with Amanda about break-ins at her apartment when she wasn't home. Amanda didn't report the incidents because nothing of value was stolen. The investigators found this story unconvincing, particularly since they had heard about the alleged break-ins multiple times before. Their suspicions grew, and they strongly suspected that Dennis was actually the person responsible for breaking into Amanda's apartment. As Rosa Roman continued to alter his initial statement, the investigators became more confident that he was hiding something crucial to the case. The priority shifted to uncovering the truth about his involvement in Amanda's death and determining what secrets he was trying to conceal. When investigators showed Dennis a photo of a dry erase board with the message, "Dennis was here," on August 11, 2011, he initially admitted to writing it, contradicting his previous statement that he had never entered Amanda's apartment. This admission was significant, as it directly implicated him in the crime. Furthermore, DNA results confirmed that Dennis had given false testimony, as his DNA matched the DNA found under Amanda's fingernails, and his palm print was found on a glass at the crime scene. After realizing that the police had gathered sufficient evidence for his arrest, Dennis changed his story for the third time. He now claimed that he had been present at the crime scene and had attempted to save Amanda from the attacker. However, he refused to name the alleged attacker, citing concerns for his and his family's safety. Instead, he provided a detailed description of the person he claimed was responsible for Amanda's death. Dennis described the alleged attacker as a tall, white, light-skinned individual with blue eyes, weighing between 170 and 200 pounds. He also claimed that the person was wearing old pants, dirty boots, and a t-shirt with the phrase, "Why drink and drive when you can smoke and fly?" Despite this new information, detectives did not believe Dennis's story, as all the evidence pointed to him as the sole perpetrator of the crime. As a result, Dennis was arrested and charged with Amanda's murder. The trial took place almost 3 years after Amanda's death and centered around the debate over whether Dennis was responsible for her murder. His lawyers presented the argument that although Dennis was at the crime scene, he did not commit the murder. Instead, they accused the police of botching the investigation and framing Dennis after their efforts to find the perpetrator failed. Dennis claimed that his involvement in Amanda's death was involuntary. He stated that his dealer forced him to collect a debt at her apartment. Dennis allegedly tried to help Amanda, but couldn't stop the dealer. He cited his DNA under her nails as evidence, saying she grabbed his hand during the incident. In contrast, the prosecutors had a different explanation for the events leading to Amanda's death. They believed that Dennis was breaking into Amanda's apartment while she was not home and that she had caught him. During one of these break-ins, Dennis allegedly left an inscription with his name on a board. Amanda assumed that Dennis was the trespasser who had stolen from her, and that is why she called him and asked him to return the stolen items. This explained the multiple phone calls between Amanda and Dennis on the day she died. Dennis, the killer of Amanda, mistakenly believed Amanda was already at work, re-entered her apartment, and ultimately took her life in a fit of anger during a dispute. A jury convicted Dennis of the crime after 8 days of testimony and 5 hours of deliberation. Dennis received a life sentence in prison with no possibility of parole. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Michelle Whitaker. Michelle Whitaker was born on August 16, 1969, to a family of 5 children. She was very close to her family, especially her mother, Laura Andrews. However, when Michelle was a teenager, her family moved from Illinois to Gastonia, North Carolina. This move marked the beginning of frequent conflicts between Michelle and her mother because Michelle felt was her mother too strict. After graduating from high school, Michelle got married, but the marriage was short-lived, lasting less than a year. Her husband's abusive behavior was the start of a long and difficult period in Michelle's life. Michelle's life began to unravel after her divorce. Her family moved to Spartanburg, South Carolina, and by the time she was 30, she was struggling with alcohol addiction and had been through 3 failed marriages. She was working part-time as a waitress and barely making ends meet. One evening in 1999, Michelle met a man named David after work, and he offered to drive her home. However, instead of taking her home, David took Michelle to a secluded location and assaulted her, forcing her to engage in intimate acts. He was arrested a year later, pleaded guilty to assault and battery, and was sentenced to 8 years in prison. Before her disappearance, Michelle was arrested for driving under the influence of alcohol. Her parents, desperate to help her, contacted the police and asked that she be held in custody until a spot in a rehabilitation center became available. However, Michelle was mistakenly released from jail without receiving the court-ordered treatment for her substance abuse. This incident caused a significant rift in her relationship with her parents, who had been trying to help her. On August 5, 2002, Michelle got into an argument with her mother and left the house in a bad mood. 3 days later, the man Michelle was staying with contacted her mother, Laura Andrews, and told her that he couldn't find Michelle after they had an argument. This was how Laura first learned that her daughter was missing. Laura immediately reached out to a friend who worked at the local police station for help in finding Michelle. However, the police were familiar with Michelle's lifestyle and advised Laura to wait a little longer, suggesting that Michelle would likely return on her own. Despite this, Michelle failed to return home over the next 2 weeks. As a result, on August 21, 2002, Laura filed an official missing persons report, and local law enforcement began investigating Michelle Whitaker's disappearance. The investigation led to a local truck stop, where Michelle was last seen. The information came from a local resident, Doug, who had met Michelle by chance on the street the day before she disappeared. Doug was out on his motorcycle in the evening when he stopped outside a bar where Michelle was sitting. They struck up a conversation, during which Michelle mentioned that she had gotten into a fight with her boyfriend and he had kicked her out of the house. Doug and Michelle spent the rest of the evening together, visiting another bar where they played billiards, and then took a ride on his motorcycle. Eventually, they went to Doug's house as the sun began to rise. As a result, Doug became the prime suspect in Michelle's disappearance, as he was the last person to have seen her alive. Doug claimed that Michelle had planned to travel to Myrtle Beach, a resort city in South Carolina, where she hoped to find well-paying work in local bars and restaurants. He alleged that he dropped her off at a truck stop and gave her some of his clothes, as well as money to buy coffee and newspapers. After wishing her good luck, he left her there. The police investigated Doug's story by administering a lie detector test, which he passed. They also tested the man Michelle had been staying with before she disappeared, but found no evidence that he was involved in her disappearance. The police started considering the possibility that Michelle might have gone to Myrtle Beach, which is about 250 miles from Spartanburg. As more weeks went by without hearing from Michelle, her family and friends became increasingly anxious. Michelle's lengthy disappearance raised suspicions with the local sheriff, who noted that people usually bring personal belongings when traveling for an extended period. But Michelle had left and carried with nothing, and her adored dog was left behind, leading detectives to believe she wouldn't willingly abandon her pet. As her parents scoured the neighborhood for any sign of her, they received tips that Michelle had been spotted on a beach in North Carolina. They quickly drove there and spent 3 days actively searching, distributing flyers, and speaking with locals. Unfortunately, their efforts yielded nothing. After 6 months of fruitless searching, Laura Andrews couldn't shake the feeling of guilt for her daughter. Laura cannot forgive herself for the hurtful words she said to Michelle after the attack. She unfairly blamed Michelle for choosing a path that put her in danger. The sheriff's office initially believed Michelle had motives to escape due to her reputation, and detectives assumed she would eventually be caught. However, a year went by with no results from the search. What concerned the police was that Michelle left no digital trail, which raised suspicions that she might have been a victim of a crime. Perhaps someone, like a truck driver, had taken advantage of her vulnerability. Despite this theory, there was no evidence to support it. 2 years later, the police still haven't received any new clues. However, on the 3rd year's anniversary of Michelle's disappearance, police along with Laura Andrews revisited the truck stop where Michelle was last seen. Local TV stations republished the story, and just days after Michelle's case was reported, the Spartanburg County Sheriff's Office received a mysterious letter. A handwritten letter, signed anonymously, was sent to investigators claiming to know the location of Michelle Whitaker's body. The letter included a homemade map pinpointing the exact spot. As a result, the sheriff promptly investigated further by sending search dogs to a rural area located 25 miles from where Michelle was last spotted. Unfortunately, the search dogs were unable to detect any scent, and the search was eventually called off. While some had resigned themselves to the possibility that Michelle was no longer alive, others continued to hold out hope that she was still safe. The investigators were also left with unanswered questions, as a handwriting analysis and DNA sample from the envelope suggested that the letter was written by a woman, but did not identify the author. New headlines emerged in the newspapers, shocking Michelle's family, since the Dana Satterfield case was one of the most prominent in Spartanburg County at the time. On July 31, 1995, 27-year-old Dana Satterfield, who owned a beauty salon on Highway 221 in Roebuck, South Carolina, was brutally attacked and killed just before closing time. 7 years later, in August 2002, Michelle Whitaker disappeared. A month and a half later, on September 24, 2002, 20-year-old Heather Sellers vanished without a trace. The last person seen with Heather was her ex-fiancé, Jonathan Vick. Vick was the main suspect in the disappearance of his ex-fiancée, Heather Sellers, but the police couldn't find enough evidence to charge him and the case remains unsolved. One thing to note in common is that Heather and Michelle Whitaker, who vanished about 50 days apart, had two things in common. They both worked at Waffle House and knew each other, and they had both been seen with Jonathan Vick. When Vick was arrested in 2005, Michelle's family members were shocked and suspected that Michelle might have been one of his victims. The police questioned Vick about Heather Sellers and Michelle Whitaker, but he denied any involvement in their disappearances. Without sufficient evidence, the investigations into their cases came to a halt. In 2008, Detective William Gary took over the case of Michelle Whitaker's disappearance, which had gone cold after years without any evidence of her being alive. Just before the 6th anniversary of her disappearance on August 4, 2008, Detective Gary received a call from a woman claiming to know Michelle's whereabouts. She said Michelle was living in Oregon and reported seeing her file on an episode of Forensic Files and a website created by Laura. The woman claimed to have recognized Michelle as a person who had been living with her friends. After years of searching, the investigators were skeptical but eager for proof, so Detective Gary asked the woman to send him a photo of Michelle. Detective Wood, who had previously handled the case, immediately recognized Michelle in the picture when Gary showed it to him. An Oregon State police officer was quickly sent to her location to confirm her identity. The police officer arrived on August 5, 2008, exactly 6 years after Michelle had argued with her mother and left home. The police then contacted Michelle's mother, Laura Andrews, with the news that her daughter had been found alive. Laura was shocked and confused by the sudden revelation. Although the news was deserved for celebration, the police couldn't simply arrange a family reunion. They had to respect Michelle's privacy and couldn't reveal her location to her parents. Instead, the detectives tried to persuade Michelle to contact her family herself. The next evening, Michelle finally called her mother. 2 weeks later, Michelle and her family were reunited at the Atlanta airport, marking the first time they had seen each other in a very long time. Michelle was exhausted with her old life after a fight with her mom, so she decided to leave and start anew, believing her family would be better off without her. Initially, she planned to go to Myrtle Beach to find work, but a series of hitched rides took her to Las Vegas, then California, and finally Oregon. 6 years later, Michelle reached out to her family and the police to apologize for the worry and resources they had expended searching for her, having lived under her real name and assuming no one was looking for her. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Jolene Cummings. Jolene Cummings, a 34-year-old mother of 3, lived in Fernandina Beach and was going through a divorce from her husband, Jason. As part of their arrangement, Jason would pick up the children on weekends from their home in Fernandina Beach, where Jolene lived with them. Jolene worked as a hairdresser at Tangle's Hair Salon. On Saturday, May 12, 2018, she worked until 5 p.m. The next day was Mother's Day and also her 34th birthday. According to their plan, Jolene was supposed to meet Jason in the parking lot of the Winn-Dixie supermarket in Hilliard on Sunday to pick up the children. However, Jolene failed to show up, and Jason was unable to reach her by phone. Jolene's mother, Ann Johnson, also tried to contact her to wish her a happy birthday, but all her calls went straight to voicemail. Jason eventually called and to ask if she knew why Jolene hadn't arrived to pick up the children. Jolene failed to pick up her children, which was unusual behavior for her. Concerned, Ann reported Jolene missing to the police on Monday, May 14th, after being unable to contact Jolene. The police immediately launched an investigation and issued a missing person poster with Jolene's photo. They also put out an alert for her 2006 Ford Expedition. On the same day, police and volunteers searched the forest area near Jolene's home but found nothing. The police learned that Jolene was last seen leaving work at the Tangles Salon on Saturday, May 12. The salon's owner reported that Jolene and her coworker, Jennifer, had closed the salon together at 5 p.m. that day. According to Jennifer, they had each gotten into their own cars and driven away separately after work. The police discovered that Jolene's last phone activity was an outgoing call made while she was still at work on May 12. The police were determined to find a lead and began scrutinizing Jolene's personal life. They focused on her ex-boyfriend Jason, as spouses often turn against each other during divorce and custody battles. Meanwhile, detectives uncovered that 5 days before Jolene vanished, a neighbor reported a loud argument at Jolene's residence. The dispute was between Jolene and Jason, with their children present. Jason had asked Jolene to let him stay with her temporarily, but she refused, knowing the police were searching for him for violating his parole. In a fit of rage, Jason began destroying property. By the time the police arrived, Jason had seemingly escaped, but the truth was unclear. After Jolene disappeared, the police began to focus on Jason as a person of interest in her disappearance. On the second day of the investigation, May 15, 2018, several significant events unfolded. The police discovered Jason hiding in Jolene's house, where he had been since the day Jolene's neighbor reported a loud argument to the authorities. He was subsequently arrested and taken to the police station for questioning. During the interrogation, Jason claimed to have no involvement in Jolene's disappearance. Meanwhile, the police found a crucial lead. Jolene's SUV was discovered parked outside a Home Depot hardware store, just a few miles from her workplace. The vehicle showed no signs of damage or struggle. After a 2-day break, Jolene's salon reopened on May 15. At 10 a.m., the police visited the salon to speak with Jennifer Sibbert, the last person to see Jolene before the weekend. However, Jennifer didn't show up for work, claiming she had an urgent matter to attend to in another city. Thanks to CCTV footage, investigators made a breakthrough in Jolene's disappearance. The footage revealed Jolene's car entering the parking lot of a hardware store, where it was later found by the police. Notably, Jennifer had claimed that she and Jolene closed the salon together at 5 p.m. on May 12, but the CCTV footage showed Jolene's car arriving at the hardware store at 1:17 a.m. on May 13, a gap of 8 hours and 17 minutes. At a press conference, Sheriff Bill Leipert explained that the CCTV footage showed Jolene's car parking at 1:17 a.m. on Sunday. The video showed the driver waiting for a few minutes before getting out. But instead of seeing Jolene exit the car, the footage surprisingly showed Jennifer Sibbert, the same hairdresser who claimed to be the last person to see Jolene. After leaving Jolene's car, Jennifer went to the gas station across the street. The gas station footage shows Jennifer entering the store, where she purchased a bottle of water and requested that an employee call her a taxi. The taxi was later confirmed to have taken her to her workplace, a salon. According to the gas station employee, Jennifer appeared to be annoyed and had visible, fresh abrasions on her face. As a result, Jennifer Sibbert became the primary suspect in the investigation, and the police began searching for her. However, the address she had provided on her job application was found to be fake. Despite her attempts to hide, Jennifer was eventually found. On May 16th, police officers spotted her black Kia Soul parked between two trucks in a recreation area, just 50 meters from the salon. Upon approaching the vehicle, the officers discovered Jennifer sleeping inside. Jennifer Sibbert was arrested and initially charged with stealing a car belonging to Jolene Cummings. When police brought her in for questioning, they noticed abrasions on her hands and face and asked her to explain them. She claimed she had been bitten by bed bugs. Further investigation revealed that she was homeless, often sleeping in her car and using a local fitness center shower. As investigators dug deeper, they made a surprising discovery that Jennifer Sibbert was not her real name. In fact, she was actually Kimberly Kessler, born in 1968 and reported missing in Pennsylvania in 2012. It turned out that she had been using the identity of Jennifer Marie Sibbert, a 13-year-old girl who had died in a car accident in Germany in 1987 and was buried in Pennsylvania. The investigation into Kimberly Kessler's case revealed a trail of deception dating back to 1996, when she began using stolen identities. At that time, she was living in Pennsylvania. Since then, Kessler has assumed at least 18 different identities and lived in 33 cities across 14 states. Many of these aliases bear similar names, which she often obtained by stealing names from gravestones and cemeteries. The police charged Kimberly Kessler with forgery after discovering she had been using fake names. A search of a storage unit she rented uncovered several suspicious items, including 4 wigs, a bag containing 2 cut-off hair tails, and 3 mobile phones. However, the most significant evidence was the discovery of Jolene Cummings's DNA on Kessler's sock and shoe. Additionally, scissors found in Kessler's car also contained Jolene's DNA. A review of Kessler's phone search history revealed that Kessler was preparing for Jolene's disappearance, which was not an accident. 2 weeks before Jolene vanished on May 12, Kessler searched for information on murder cases, including a query about a man who was charged with murder after his co-worker's remains were found in his yard. She also searched for information on co-workers who had been found guilty of murder, even when the victim's body had not been found. Kessler's search history also included queries about how to use a tourniquet, as well as information on female murderers in Florida and autopsy procedures. Furthermore, she searched for information on post-mortem changes, which suggests that she was trying to learn about what happens to the body after death. These search queries are particularly suspicious in light of a discovery made by the owner of the hair salon where Jolene worked. The owner reported that the plant in the salon had been replaced, which may be connected to Kessler's search for information on how to dispose of a body. On May 13th, the day Jolene failed to pick up her kids, Kessler conducted internet searches at 12:05 p.m. for indoor palm and then at 12:06 p.m. for variation palm tree. The police analyzed CCTV footage from a nearby home goods store and found that Kessler visited the store on May 14th at 2:39 p.m. and left 30 minutes later with a palm plant, which was later found at the Tangles Hair Salon. Kessler's online searches continued, with Jolene Cummings I Have Vanished on May 15th at 6:13 p.m. and No Body No Crime on May 16th at 6:27 p.m. Forensic experts used luminol and ultraviolet light to examine the hair salon and discovered evidence of a serious crime, as the room glowed under the testing. On May 22nd, the sheriff announced during a press conference that they had gathered sufficient evidence to conclude that Jolene Cummings was dead, although some evidence was being withheld to protect the investigation. Further investigation revealed that Jolene had expressed concerns about her coworker Jennifer, the new hairdresser, to another employee at the Tangles salon, stating that Jennifer seemed suspicious and was hiding something. This conversation took place about a week before Jolene's disappearance. Witnesses reported that Jolene and Jennifer had a tense relationship, and one person even saw them arguing on May 9th, just 3 days before Jolene vanished. The Tangles hair salon eventually closed on June 5, 2018. The hair salon footage shows of Kessler visiting the dumpster at least 4 times. In the first footage, taken shortly after midnight, Kessler is seen doing something near the dumpster. At 8:08 a.m., she returns to throw away a heavy-looking white garbage bag. 14 minutes later, she disposes of another similar bag. The final footage, taken an hour before midnight, shows Kessler lifting a waste container to empty its contents, suggesting it also holds something heavy. The Walmart security footage revealed what Kessler had thrown away in the dumpster. The video showed her purchasing items at the self-checkout, including garbage bags, cleaning supplies, latex gloves, and an electric knife. This discovery led the police to investigate further. They found that a local waste management company was taking trash to a landfill in Georgia. In July 2018, nearly 200 people searched the landfill for a week, but the sheriff did not disclose what they found, citing the ongoing investigation. Near the dumpster where Kessler disposed of the white garbage bags, the police discovered a piece of jewelry, women's shoes, and a blue plastic container that matched one found in Kessler's storage unit. The container contained Jolene Cummings's DNA. Although Jolene's body was not found, the police had sufficient evidence to arrest Kessler for her murder. Kessler's first court appearance was on January 17, 2019, where she pleaded not guilty. However, the trial was delayed for several years due to concerns about Kessler's sanity. She went on a hunger strike, losing significant weight, and her court appearances often ended in outbursts of anger. In 2021, Kessler underwent mandatory treatment before the court session, and she was eventually deemed competent to stand trial. During a press conference, Sheriff Leeper made a statement saying that they were sending Kessler to Florida State Prison, where she would spend the rest of her life. Sadly, Jolene Cummings's body has never been recovered or found. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Christina Carlin Craft. Christina Rose Carlin Craft was born on November 11, 1983, in southern New Jersey, to Stuart Craft and Dawn Carlin. From a young age, she enjoyed being in front of the camera, whether it was being photographed or videotaped. After graduating from high school in Linwood in 2000, Christina worked as a waitress in southern New Jersey and later at the Borgata Hotel Casino and Spa in Atlantic City. Although she had a stable job, her true aspiration was to become a model. Christina's determination eventually paid off, and she achieved some success in the modeling industry. In her promotional materials, she expressed her love for posing in elegant lingerie and swimwear. According to Eva Waltz, a friend Christina met while working on a 3-day photo shoot for Maxim magazine, Christina was a charming and beautiful person with a great sense of humor. With her dark hair and blue eyes, she embodied the qualities of a fashion model. Christina's ultimate goal was to appear on the cover of Playboy. In 2003, while still working as a waitress at the Borgata Casino, Christina met Alex Caiatelli, and they soon began dating. Alex supports Christina's ambitions and never hindered her career. They got engaged after a long relationship. During this time, Christina became Cyber Girl of the Month in May 2009, earning an invitation to the Playboy Mansion, where she attended exclusive events and experienced luxury. At the height of her career, Christina's ambitions soared, particularly after meeting Hugh Hefner. Unfortunately, despite her efforts, she failed to secure a modeling contract with Playboy magazine, a highly competitive opportunity that only one girl among thousands of applicants can attain. Christina faced significant obstacles in becoming a top model at that time. One major issue was her age, At 26, she was considered too old for certain magazines that typically feature younger models. Despite this, she continued to work hard, landing jobs with prominent companies like Redken, Maxim, Victoria's Secret, and Vanity Fair. Determined to advance her career, Christina moved to New York with her boyfriend Alex. However, her decision to pose for Playboy proved to be a setback. Many brands were hesitant to work with her after the explicit photo shoot, and her career began to decline. Eventually, it came to a complete halt. It was a challenging time for Christina, but she was grateful to have Alex's support to help her through it. Christina was a woman known for both her physical beauty and her controversial behavior. In 2016, she caused a disturbance at the Smith, a New York restaurant. Following the incident, the New York Post published several articles about what had happened. According to law enforcement sources and court documents, Christina Carlin Craft, 34, was dining at the Smith with a male friend on March 6 when an argument broke out over the bill. The man refused to pay, and the manager, Sergei Anakin, intervened. Christina, who was reportedly intoxicated, claimed the manager had pushed her, but a video of the incident showed that was not true. During the altercation, Christina allegedly hit a police officer on the neck, causing redness and significant pain. She was subsequently charged with misdemeanor assault, attempted assault, and harassment. However, after the district attorney offered her a deal, the charges were dropped on the condition that she stayed out of trouble for 6 months. Christina's lawyer explained that she accepted a reasonable deal offered by the district attorney. Christina had always been fond of Philadelphia, particularly Ardmore, where she felt a strong sense of safety. Considering this, Alex purchased an apartment for her in Ardmore, and they of them relocated to Pennsylvania in 2018. However, Christina soon discovered that Ardmore did not live up to her expectations of being a safe haven. In fact, on August 18, 2018, she reported a robbery to the police. Christina spent the evening at a bar in Philadelphia, but her memories of the night are hazy. The next morning, she woke up with no recollection of how she got home or if anyone was with her. She suspected that someone had drugged her with illegal substances. Feeling scared, she confided in others about her concerns. Her partner, Alex, was away on a business trip at the time, which added to her anxiety. The police investigation into the incident uncovered CCTV footage that showed a car arriving at Christina's apartment building around 3 a.m. The footage revealed that Christina was unconscious in the back seat. The driver, who was later identified as the perpetrator, took Christina's keys from her purse and entered her apartment. Once inside, the thief stole over $50,000 worth of valuables, including jewelry, designer handbags, sunglasses, a credit card, and personal documents. The perpetrator spent about an hour and a half in Christina's apartment before returning to the car. He then helped Christina out of the vehicle and into her apartment building, leaving her in the hallway. The thief put the keys back in Christina's purse and drove away, leaving her disoriented and frightened. The police were able to identify the perpetrator of the robbery with the help of a credit card statement. The culprit was Andre Melton, a man with a prior criminal record. At the time of the robbery, Melton was driving a rented 2018 Kia Sorento with a Virginia license plate. Witnesses reported seeing the same car near Christina's house on August 17, a sighting confirmed by police using specialized license plate recognition software. As the police searched for Melton and worked to recover Christina's stolen belongings, a far more serious crime occurred. On August 22, 2018, Alex Caiatelli called the police to ask them to check on his girlfriend, Christina Carlin Craft, as he was unable to contact her. When he arrived home, he found the apartment door locked from the inside. A review of the security system revealed that someone had opened the front door and balcony door overnight. The police were forced to break down the front door to gain entry. Upon entering the apartment, they immediately discovered a crime scene, with a body on the bed covered in a blanket and blood visible. Christina Carlin Craft's brutally beaten body was discovered under a blanket. She had suffered severe injuries, including a broken nose and strangulation marks on her neck. When Christina's identity was confirmed, the news of her death was devastating to Alex. As the police investigated further, they couldn't rule out the possibility that Alex might be involved in her murder. After all, the closest people to the victim are often the prime suspects. Christina and Alex had a long history together, and anything could have happened between them. The fact that Alex had called the police to express his concern about Christina, only to have her body discovered shortly after, raised suspicions. It was possible that Alex had staged his concern to divert attention from himself. The detectives asked him to accompany them to the police station for questioning, and Alex agreed without hesitation. Alex told investigators he had to return to New York for urgent work on August 21st. On August 22nd, at 2:30 a.m., he called Christina to say goodnight, but she didn't answer. Since Christina was always awake at that hour, Alex grew concerned. He called her several more times, but got no response. He then checked the security system and found suspicious activity at the apartment that night. Alex decided to put his business on hold and return to Ardmore immediately. The police believed Alex's story and ruled him out as a suspect, as it was impossible for him to be in two places at once. His alibi checked out, and the police cleared him of any involvement in Christina's death. The main suspect in Christina's murder was initially Andre Melton, who had previously stolen valuables from her apartment. It's possible that he returned to the apartment to steal again, but his plan was foiled when Christina caught him. Alternatively, he may have discovered that she had reported him to the police and sought revenge. On August 22nd, the day Christina's body was discovered, the police obtained an arrest warrant for Andre Melton. When they went to his residence, they found some of Christina's belongings, but Melton was nowhere to be found. However, surveillance footage from the night of the crime revealed that Christina had returned to her apartment with an unknown man at 3:08 a.m., but it wasn't Andre Melton. Further analysis of the footage showed that the unknown man did not leave the apartment. To investigate further, police reviewed CCTV footage from the streets of Ardmore and discovered that Christina had visited a bar in Philadelphia before returning to her apartment. At the bar, investigators found footage of Christina meeting a man who later hugged her, the same man she had returned to her apartment with. Christina and a new acquaintance hailed a taxi after leaving the bar. Detectives tracked her movements to rebuild the timeline of events leading up to her death. They eliminated Melton as a suspect since he wasn't with her that day. They still had to determine if her death was connected to the earlier robbery or just a coincidence. On August 25th, the police got a new lead. Andrew Sanford, the taxi driver who drove Christina and her companion that night. He reported that Christina and her friend had approached him, and they didn't use the taxi app. After agreeing on a fare, they got into the taxi. According to Sanford, the couple seemed affectionate and friendly, so they didn't raise any suspicions. Sanford also remembered that when they arrived at their destination, Christina took the initiative to settle the fare. However, she didn't have any cash on her. She offered to leave her credit card, but Sanford refused. Then, Christina's friend offered him $100 if he would wait 10 to 15 minutes near the house while they went to the apartment. Sanford left 20 minutes later, as neither Christina nor her friend returned. Christina and the man entered their apartment around 3 a.m. At 4 a.m., Christina made a brief call to her cousin, but didn't speak a word. Her cousin, however, heard a man in the background instructing Christina not to call the police. The call ended abruptly, leaving the cousin unclear about what was happening. The police later determined the timeline of the crime using the apartment's door sensors, which recorded the exact times the doors were opened. The data showed that the first door opening occurred at 3:08 a.m. and the next at 5:10 a.m. Since the apartment was on the second floor, the investigators suspected that the perpetrator had left through the sliding glass door on the balcony, which was also detected by the security system around the same time. This explained why the surveillance cameras did not capture the moment when the man Christina met at the bar left the apartment. When the police arrived after Alex's call, they found Christina alone in the apartment. Based on this information, the police theorized that the perpetrator escaped by jumping off the balcony. The investigation's next step was to seek the public's help through the media. After releasing the surveillance camera images, the authorities asked anyone with information to come forward. The photos showed two individuals, Andre Melton and the second person who was at Christina's apartment on the night of her death. Surprisingly, Andre Melton called the police by himself, admitting to stealing from Christina but denying involvement in her murder. On August 26th, the police station received an anonymous call from a man who claimed to know one of the suspects in the recent crime. The caller revealed that he had shared a room with the suspect at a psychiatric clinic in Philadelphia. According to the caller, the suspect had previously assaulted a woman in Love Park and molesting her. The suspect became aggressive, shouting and causing a disturbance, and was eventually hospitalized for 2 hours at a cost of $70. However, he was not identified. The caller provided more chilling information. The suspect had bragged about strangling a woman and felt proud and satisfied by the act. This new information convinced investigators that the suspect was likely responsible for the murder of Christina Carlincraft. The police received another call from a Philadelphia relative of the suspect, who identified the man in the photo as Jonathan Wesley Harris, a convicted felon with a history of robbery. Harris had been released from prison on July 15th, just 5 weeks before Christina's murder. After studying the suspect's entire biography, it became clear that Andre Melton and Jonathan Harris had no prior connection and had never met. As a result, the police ruled out any link between their crimes. Additionally, the police gained access to Harris's phone messages. On August 22nd, he texted a friend that he had met an attractive woman and was going to her apartment. On August 28th, the police obtained an arrest warrant for Jonathan Harris. It was essential to apprehend him as soon as possible, as no one knew what he might do next. However, Harris had left no trail. When investigators contacted Harris's sister on August 29, 2018, she revealed that he had recently purchased a bus ticket to Pittsburgh. As it turned out, Harris was already on the bus when the conversation took place. The Ardor police were unable to act, and the officers wouldn't be able to catch up with him. The Pittsburgh police were their last hope. Timing was crucial, and the police investigating Christina's death contacted the Pittsburgh Law Enforcement Agency for assistance. They informed the task force of the bus's expected arrival time in Pittsburgh and shared a photo of Harris, helping them plan a strategic ambush. The officers blocked off all potential escape routes and were prepared to apprehend the suspect at a moment's notice. As the bus approached, one of the employees spotted Harris and allowed him to disembark calmly, reducing the likelihood of panic or chaotic behavior. About 10 minutes later, a police officer intercepted Harris. Harris gave a false name when asked to identify himself. He was arrested and taken to the police station, where detectives from Philadelphia interrogated him about his involvement in Christina's case. Harris claimed that he met Christina at a bar or nightclub, where she was alone and he approached her. He admitted to being under the influence of both illegal substances and alcohol at the time. After chatting and having a drink, Christina invited him to her place. Once they arrived, Harris asked the taxi driver to wait, intending to return shortly. However, he ended up staying with Christina, and they drank multiple bottles of wine together. He claimed that they then engaged in an intimate relationship with mutual consent and used a prohibited substance. Afterward, Harris demanded that Christina pay him $1,200, which she refused. The situation escalated into a physical altercation when Christina allegedly hit Harris with a wine bottle. In response, Harris claimed he hit her in the face, causing her to fall to the floor. When Christina attempted to call for emergency assistance, Harris strangled her with sweatpants until she lost consciousness. Despite his account, several inconsistencies were found in his story. During the toxicology examination, experts found no prohibited substances in Christina's body, only alcohol. This contradicted the suspect's initial claim that he had only hit her once. When confronted with the results, Harris admitted to lying. Harris initially tried to convince detectives of his innocence, claiming Christina was fine when he left her apartment. However, during a subsequent interrogation, he fully confessed to his guilt. He explained that he had panicked after severely beating her, leaving her while she was still breathing, and covering her with a blanket to avoid the sight. Ultimately, Jonathan Harris confessed to taking Christina's life and attempting to escape detection by jumping off the balcony. Despite his earlier confession, Harris pleaded not guilty at the trial. Nevertheless, the investigators had gathered substantial evidence, making it impossible for Harris and his lawyer to win the case. The court was expected to sentence Jonathan Harris to 22 to 40 years in prison for the crime of third-degree life deprivation. However, the large amount of evidence presented by the prosecutors convinced the court that the crime was intentional, making life imprisonment a possibility. During the trial, a key witness testified against Harris. This witness had shared a room with Harris at a psychiatric clinic and had previously reported Harris to the police. Harris had confessed to the crime while in the clinic, telling the witness that he enjoyed the feeling of squeezing someone and watching them take their last breath. In the end, Judge William R. Carpenter sentenced Jonathan Wesley Harris to 30 years to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge handed down an additional 22 to 45-year sentence to Harris. The lengthy sentence was intended to send a message to future authorities who might consider granting him early release or pardon. In a separate case, Andre Melton was arrested in December 2018 and charged with burglarizing Carlin Craft's apartment. He was sentenced in March 2020 to 1 to 4 years in prison, followed by 3 years of consecutive probation, totaling 7 years under court supervision. Before receiving his sentence, Melton apologized to Carlin Craft's family. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Nicholas Wilcox. Nicholas Wilcox, a 39-year-old man from Putnam, Connecticut, lives in a duplex apartment, a popular property type in Florida that is designed for 2 families, with separate rooms, yards, and entrances. Isabella, a 38-year-old woman from Brazil, was the first person invited to rent one of the vacant apartments by Nicholas Wilcox. She used to work as a flight attendant for a national airline in Brazil. After getting divorced in 2010, she moved to America with her children and later married an American, which helped her obtain a green card. Isabella's marriage ended in 2016, and she started dating Eric Robinson, a 46-year-old man from Massachusetts who had never been married and had no children. Despite their romantic feelings for each other, their relationship was occasionally turbulent due to their passionate nature and Eric's bachelor lifestyle. According to Isabella, Eric's behavior was inconsistent and unpredictable, switching between cheerfulness and aggression without warning. This led to repeated breakups and makeups. By June 2017, they had separated once again, shortly before Eric and Isabella moved in with Nicholas. Initially, the living arrangement worked well, with Nicholas and Isabella and Eric respecting each other's space while also spending quality time together. However, over time, problems arose. It was discovered that Eric was using and storing illicit substances, which explained his erratic mood swings. This behavior led to Eric's arrest on August 23, 2017. Nicholas was fortunate to have a steady stream of work, unlike Isabella, who struggled to find a suitable job. To make ends meet, she started helping her neighbor in the construction business. It's worth noting that Nicholas's family had a long history of working in similar trades. His grandfather was a fisherman and boat builder, while his father dedicated his life to construction. After graduating in 1996, Nicholas joined the family business, becoming a roofer. He worked alongside his older brother, Donald, as contractors, building their own client base. At 23, Nicholas started a family with his high school classmate, Kathy. They had a daughter a year later, and twins 3 years after that. Throughout this time, Nicholas worked hard to provide for his family. Despite his busy schedule, friends and acquaintances remembered him as a devoted husband and father. However, his dedication to his professional pursuits may have contributed to the eventual breakdown of his family. They divorced shortly after the birth of their younger children. Despite this, Nicholas continued to support and communicate with his family. In 2017, Nicholas made a fresh start by moving to Florida to pursue better job opportunities. The new location proved to be a smart choice, as he saw a significant increase in clients. Unlike his previous seasonal work, Nicholas was now able to earn a steady income almost year-round. As a professional, Nicholas's skills were in high demand in Florida, where powerful hurricanes frequently damaged homes along the coast during storm season. His expertise was needed to reinforce and repair homes, which helped him build a successful business. Despite leaving his family back in Connecticut, Nicholas remained committed to caring for his children from a distance, sending them financial support and visiting whenever possible, as per his agreement with his ex-wife. After living in a multi-apartment complex in Fort Lauderdale, Nicholas moved to the suburbs to lower his housing costs. This is when he met Isabella. As the hurricane season began, Nicholas's workload increased significantly due to daily orders. At the same time, Hurricane Irma was approaching the area where Nicholas lived and worked. An emergency was declared, and about 7 million people were evacuated from coastal areas. To prepare for the storm, Nicholas spent his time reinforcing homes, boarding up windows and doors, and later clearing the debris left behind. Nicholas's main job was to help people, and he got paid for it. But he wasn't in it just for the money. His older brother said that Nicholas always lent a hand to those in need. In September 2017, Florida was bracing for a devastating hurricane. Nicholas spent the day boarding up windows with plywood to prepare. As a result, there was a shortage of plywood in stores, leading to long lines of people waiting to buy some. At that time, Nicholas met a woman named Pamela, who was struggling to find materials to protect her home. Nicholas promised to help her, and that evening, he delivered the 7 sheets of plywood she needed. He then spent the whole day boarding up her doors and windows, refusing payment for his efforts. Nicholas was deeply sympathetic to Pamela's plight as a single mother in need of assistance. In response, he offered her help, and she was extremely grateful. This sparked a romantic connection between them. The devastating hurricane that followed brought Nicholas a substantial amount of work, which allowed him to employ his neighbor, Isabella, as his assistant. Isabella's responsibilities included cleaning up job sites and handing Nicholas tools as needed. As they spent more time together, their friendly interactions blossomed into romance. On September 3rd, they made a commitment to each other, sealing their promise with a handwritten vow in blood, symbolizing their desire for a long, happy life together, filled with many children. The lovers, Nicholas and Isabella, faced minor issues and disagreements soon after their union. These disputes escalated, culminating in a serious conflict on September 22nd, which led Isabella to leave home and spend the night in a hotel. However, they reconciled the next morning. According to Isabella, Nicholas was neglecting her and showing a lack of respect. Nicholas, on the other hand, believed she was exaggerating. Their disagreements ultimately led to severe consequences. On October 5, 2017, a mysterious call was made to the local police. The caller claimed to be Isabella's former husband and asked the police to contact Isabella, stating she had information about a recent crime. However, he didn't provide further details. The police responded promptly and called Isabella, who sounded hysterical. When questioned about the situation, she claimed everything was fine, except for a fight with her boyfriend, Nicholas. Isabella told the police that her partner had left her and driven away, but when they mentioned a call from her former husband, she broke down and confessed that her partner was actually dead. She claimed to know where the body was and offered to show them. When the police arrived at the address Isabella provided, they found a house that was being prepared for a hurricane, with all windows and doors boarded up. Inside, they noticed a strong smell of cleaning products and paint, indicating that one of the bedrooms had been thoroughly cleaned. However, upon closer inspection, the detective suspected that someone was trying to cover something up. The walls and floor had been hastily and sloppily painted, and they found containers of hydrogen peroxide, which is often used to clean bloodstains. They discovered small bloodstains on the bedding and bedside table, and it was clear that the old mattress had been replaced. The police found blood stains throughout the room, suggesting a violent crime had taken place. Isabella had attempted to clean up the scene but hadn't finished before the police arrived. Isabella was discovered inside the duplex, visibly distressed, and explained that she had been under the influence of a sedative during the phone call with her ex-husband, which accounted for her unusual behavior. Despite her initial confusion, Isabella confirmed that she knew what had happened in the room and where the body was located. Due to her unstable state, the police decided to take her to the station for further questioning. Meanwhile, the police had spoken with her ex-husband again, who provided a partial account of the events. According to Isabella's ex-husband, she had called him and told him about the crime. However, during her interrogation, Isabella claimed that her former boyfriend, Eric Robinson, was involved in the crime. She stated that on October 5th, around 2 a.m., Eric had arrived at the duplex, found her and Nicholas asleep, and became enraged by a vow hanging above the bed's headboard in the bedroom. Eric woke Isabella by holding a knife to her throat, threatening to harm her if she screamed. As he did, she saw Nicholas, who was lying next to her, struggling to breathe. But Eric didn't allow her to look any further and forced her out of the bedroom. Then, he brutally beat Nicholas, who was defenseless, using a brass knuckle and a bat. After the beating, Eric wrapped Nicholas' body in a tarp and tied it up with straps. He threatened Isabella, forcing her to help him get rid of the body. Later, the detectives were confused as to why Isabella, instead of calling the police, had called her ex-husband. In an explanation, Isabella said she was terrified and sought comfort and guidance. According to her, Eric also made her clean up the crime scene and erase all evidence. Before leaving, he returned her phone, which he had taken earlier. Her confession raised doubts and required further investigation. Additionally, the detectives noticed visible bruises and scratches on Isabella's body, which she claimed were a result of Eric beating her after Nicholas' death. The investigation started with a search for the victim and the suspect, who revealed the location of Nicholas. While medical examiners worked on the body, forensic specialists arrived at the scene. Meanwhile, law enforcement searched for Eric, who had been released from prison on October 3rd and was living at a different address. During this time, Eric had met a woman, Merida, and was staying with her. Merida told the police that on the night of October 5th, her boyfriend received a phone call and left immediately. He returned around 5 a.m., packed his things, and left again without explanation. When asked if she noticed any bloodstains on her boyfriend's clothes, Merida said she hadn't seen anything suspicious. Eric was found around 8 p.m., 4 miles away from the house. He refused to cooperate with the investigation and was taken into custody for further inquiry. During the interrogation, Eric provided a different account of the events than Isabella's. According to Eric, Isabella had contacted him on the night of October 5th, despite having a restraining order against him. Isabella attacked Nicholas while under the influence of banned substances and ultimately ended his life. After regaining her composure, she realized she needed help and asked Eric to assist her. In exchange, she promised to rekindle their relationship and start anew. Eric, still having strong feelings for her, agreed to her terms. The investigation revealed that Isabella was not as innocent as she seemed. She had a history of police encounters, and on September 22nd, a heated argument with Nicholas got out of hand. Under the influence of Xanax and other substances, Isabella became violent, destroying some of Nicholas' belongings and damaging his work vehicle. Fearing for his life, Nicholas contacted the police. Although they reconciled the next morning and Nicholas dropped the complaint, investigators discovered Isabella's history of erratic behavior, including a conversation with her ex-husband that shed more light on her past. He described Isabella as having a volatile personality and a hot temper. During their argument, he had threatened to report her to immigration services if she continued to behave in such a manner. For Isabella, the opportunity to live in the U.S. was crucial, so the threat of deportation was devastating. It's possible that during another argument, Isabella's explosive personality led her to react violently, motivated by her desire to stay in America. To gather more information, detectives started interviewing people close to them. A neighbor who lived in the adjacent duplex proved to be a crucial witness. She reported seeing Eric arrive at the scene in his car on the night of the crime. He then retrieved some tools and trash bags before leaving the area. The investigation continued, with substantial evidence collected. On October 11th, Isabella was called in for another interrogation, which she attended voluntarily since she had not been arrested at that point. Detectives reviewed video surveillance footage and determined that on the night of the incident, Isabella personally moved Nicholas's body and disposed of it in a trash container. During this time, she remained calm and composed, making decisions independently. She also met with Eric Robinson that night. Isabella appeared relaxed and friendly. She even purchased items needed for emergency repairs herself. However, as the investigation progressed, she began to change her story, adding new details about the events. Isabella claimed that Eric had threatened to kill her and deport her and her children, forcing her to act as she did. Although her statement seemed believable, investigators were cautious in their conclusions. Both Eric and Isabella had questionable pasts, which raised suspicions. Eric, in particular, had a history of run-ins with the law, dating back to 2001, primarily for possession and distribution of narcotics. In August 2016, Isabella had legitimate reasons to fear Eric in question, as he had committed an aggravated assault against a woman. In June 2017, he was arrested for strangulation and later that year for possessing prohibited substances. Eric's neighbors were terrified of him due to his aggressive and unpredictable behavior, and they actively avoided him. On October 14th, experts discovered traces of Isabella's DNA on the Nicholas body, contradicting her claim of not having touched Nicholas. This evidence suggested that she was involved in the violent crime against her lover, at the very least in disposing of the body and eliminating evidence. Despite the evidence, neither Isabella or Eric admitted to any wrongdoing. While Eric was held in custody, Isabella was briefly detained before being released to await trial. Although everyone expected the court proceedings to begin soon, various complications and delays pushed the trial back by 5 years. The trial of Eric Robinson was significantly delayed due to the bureaucratic issues. During this time, the prosecution developed its strategy and tactics, while the defense thoroughly reviewed the investigation findings. Additionally, new evidence was discovered, including the recovery of Eric's deleted social media account, which he had used to discuss the crime with his former friend. As the trial approached, Isabella made a plea deal with the prosecution. She agreed to testify against Eric Robinson. On April 10, 2023, the trial finally took place. The prosecution argued that Eric was solely responsible for the crime against Nicholas, while Isabella's role was presented as a witness who tampered with evidence and helped eliminate traces, a crime in itself. The trial was marked by several cancellations due to legal complexities, but resumed after a week. Throughout the trial, Eric was charged with premeditated murder. Despite inconsistencies in Isabella's testimonies, her attorney maintained her innocence. The prosecution emphasized witness statements describing Eric's unusual behavior on the night of the crime. Specifically, Eric used his new girlfriend's car, which didn't have GPS tracking, to avoid detection. He also left his mobile phone at home to prevent tracking. Separately, other case details came to light. After the crime, Eric and Isabella were together in a room nearby, where they were intimate. Isabella later explained her actions, stating she was under the influence of strong sedatives at the time and also feared for her life after what had happened. The motive behind the brutal and senseless murder of Nicholas was revealed to be jealousy. Although Isabella had ended their relationship, Eric still considered her his girlfriend. When he was released from prison, he returned home to find that significant changes had taken place in his absence, which only fueled his rage and hatred. During this time, Eric plotted his revenge against his perceived rival. He committed a cold-blooded attack while Nicholas was asleep and vulnerable, sealing his fate with the first strike. Eric then attempted to cover his tracks by scattering evidence in various locations. The murder weapon was later found in a landfill, and Nicholas's body was discovered wrapped in tarpaulin and hidden in a trash container. Isabella, following Eric's instructions, painted over the blood-splattered walls and cleaned the area to conceal the evidence. Ultimately, 51-year-old Eric was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole for second-degree murder. Isabella was found guilty of aiding Eric, but the court considered threats and coercion as mitigating circumstances. As a result, she received a suspended sentence and is on probation until 2026. Isabella was willing to do whatever it took to gain U.S. citizenship. Just 10 days after Eric was incarcerated, the parties signed another agreement in which Eric promised to marry Isabella. However, he failed to follow through on this promise. It seems that Isabella is willing to marry anyone as long as it helps her maintain her status. All the men she has been involved with have been used for her own selfish purposes, and she has manipulated them into considering marriage. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Maricela Botella Valadez. Maricela Botella Valadez was born in 1997 in Seattle, Washington. As the eldest of two children in a Latin American family, she was known for being a kind, outgoing young woman with many friends. She excelled in school and went on to attend a prestigious university after graduating. Maricela was a stunning young woman with a petite frame, long brunette hair, and big brown eyes. She was always the center of attention and loved being around people, often attending lively parties and making the most of every day. On October 3, 2020, Maricela traveled to Dallas to visit old friends, but she planned to return by Monday morning. Her brother was supposed to pick her up from the airport on October 5, and they would head to the university together. However, when the plane arrived, Maricela was nowhere to be found. A search for the missing student began when her brother realized she wasn't among the passengers who had disembarked from the flight. He tried to call her, but her phone was turned off. He then contacted their parents to inform them of the situation. Maricela's disappearance was unusual, as she was a responsible and serious young woman who would not normally miss university classes without warning. Maricela's family reached out to her friends in Dallas to gather information about her possible whereabouts and her last known location. Their efforts led them to a popular club in the city, where she was spotted partying with friends the night before her disappearance. While there, she had met a man named Chuck and they had danced and socialized together over drinks. After that, they of them left the club, and Maricela was not seen again. When her family was unable to reach her by phone, they grew extremely concerned and frightened, prompting them to quickly report her disappearance to the police. She had purchased tickets for a flight to Seattle, but she never boarded the plane. Her whereabouts since that night were unknown. To investigate further, it was crucial to identify the new person she had met, their destination, and whether she had left with them voluntarily. Reviewing surveillance footage from outside the club, authorities observed Maricela exiting with a young man, but his face was not clearly visible on the video. According to the footage, Maricela appeared to be walking with a man voluntarily before getting into a black Audi car and driving off in an unknown direction. Several days had passed since her disappearance, and she had not contacted anyone, logged into her social media accounts, or made any transactions on her bank cards. The police urgently needed to identify the stranger she was with to determine where to search for them. One of her friends reported that the companion might be named Chuck, but this information was not enough. However, street camera footage helped investigators determine the direction the car had traveled. Further review of supermarket security footage revealed that they had stopped to shop, appearing happy and affectionate towards each other. The footage showed Maricela selecting drinks and candies, while he paid for the items using a card in the name of Charles Beltran. It became clear that Maricela had left with Beltran, a 31-year-old musician who was gaining popularity as a local rap star. However, Beltran had a troubled past, having been to prison twice for robbery and armed assault. He had been released on parole after serving less than 3 years and was on the verge of releasing his own music album. An investigation revealed that Maricela's phone had been active at a specific location on the night she went missing. The location was linked to a house owned by a woman named Lisa Dyke, who was renting a room to Beltran. When police and an FBI agent investigating Maricela's disappearance visited the house, they found it empty. The police were only able to reach Lisa Dyke by phone, as she said she was out of state for work. She confirmed that Charles Beltran had been renting a room in her home, but claimed he had moved out about 2 weeks ago. She also stated that she had no idea where he was after that. They searched the house where he used to live and made several alarming discoveries. The interior was a disaster zone with mess and unsanitary conditions everywhere. It appeared as if the residents had departed abruptly, only taking essential belongings and abandoning the rest. Dirty dishes were stacked high in the sink, old food and mold sat on the kitchen table, and garbage covered the corners of the floor. In stark contrast, investigators found multiple empty bottles of cleaning supplies scattered around, and there were also remnants on the floor and carpet indicating an attempt to scrub areas clean. A disturbing black statue of death, draped in a black cloak and grasping a scythe, occupied one of the upstairs rooms. While it could have been dismissed as an eccentric decoration, its presentation as a makeshift altar, complete with wax candles, dried flowers, and 2 metal bowls, suggested a more sinister purpose. The setup bore an uncanny resemblance to the Mexican cult of Santa Muerte, which reveres a female embodiment of death. The house exuded an atmosphere of foreboding, as if a traumatic event had occurred, prompting the occupants to hastily gather their belongings and flee in a state of panic. A more thorough investigation was conducted using specialized tools to detect blood traces. This revealed multiple wiped blood stains in one of the bedrooms, the bathroom, and the hallway. The bedroom with the most significant bloodstains belonged to Charles, suggesting a violent crime had occurred there. However, the identity of the victim remained unclear. Despite attempts to clean the area, the blood had penetrated the carpet, seeped under the baseboards, and stained the wallpaper and furniture. To confirm the source of the blood, experts compared the samples with Maricella's DNA. The results eliminated any remaining doubts, confirming that the blood belonged to Maricela. The police had to seal the house as a crime scene, but their next challenge was to track down the main suspect, potential accomplices, and witnesses. However, this proved to be a difficult task as Charles had already fled the scene, and the owner had quickly put the house up for sale even before the police arrived. To gather more information, the police decided to investigate the people who had recently lived in the house. According to the neighbors, who described a complicated love triangle, 3 individuals had lived in the house: 57-year-old Lisa Dyke, 48-year-old Nina Morano, and 31-year-old Charles Beltran. However, the nature of their relationships and the reason for their sudden disappearance remained unclear. To move forward with the investigation, the police needed to look into each person's background and find them as soon as possible for questioning. The owner of the house, who was the only one reachable by phone, was a well-known lawyer with a commanding and ambitious personality. She had been married 3 times and had inherited a substantial amount of money after becoming a widow several years ago. Given her financial situation, it was unclear why she had rented a room to Charles, as she was not known for her charitable nature, suggesting that she may have had an ulterior motive. Charles Beltran, also known as Chuck, had big dreams of becoming a successful rapper. However, his lack of funds and connections, combined with a troubled past, made it difficult for him to get started. That was until he met Dyke, who offered him a helping hand. She took him in, setting up a small recording studio in her home, and even funded the production of several music videos to help launch his career. Dyke also provided Chuck with a car, paid for his social expenses, and bought him stylish clothing. Despite her significant financial investment in Chuck, Dyke maintained that their relationship was purely professional, insisting that she saw great potential in the young rapper and was simply investing in his future. The situation with Nina Morano was particularly interesting. She had been in a long-term relationship with Lisa, and after Lisa's husband passed away, they women no longer hid their romance. In fact, they had gotten married just a few months prior. Nina moved in with Lisa, who was already living with a young musician named Charles. Although Lisa denied it, a close friend claimed that she had a romantic relationship with Charles, and Lisa had even confided in her friend about how great he was as a lover. It seemed that Lisa was deeply in love with Charles, as evidenced by her efforts to look younger, including losing 55 pounds, changing her image, wearing bright makeup, and getting tattoos. Lisa had also made some significant changes to her life, including evicting her adult children from the home, citing that they were interfering with her personal life. Charles, on the other hand, had a clear interest in staying with Lisa, who was wealthy and could help him financially and advance his music career. However, as a physically attractive man, Charles often engaged in casual flings with young women, which made Lisa extremely jealous. But what was Nina Morano's role in all of this, and specifically, what did she have to do with Morella's disappearance? According to a close friend, Lisa's spouse, Na, was also involved in the unusual love triangle with Lisa and he. Na was a successful lawyer and a wealthy woman. The 3 of them lived a life of luxury together. After they got married, both women took his last name, Beltran, and the 3 of them lived together in the house. But what happened to the people who lived in the house where Morella's blood was discovered? After Morella disappeared, no one was seen at home again. Lisa was contacted once and answered a few questions, claiming she was in another state, but her phone was unreachable after that. There was no information about Na's whereabouts or the main suspect, Charles. On the night of October 5th, investigators monitored the mobile phone signals of the 3 residents and the missing person, Maricela, and found that all 4 signals were coming from within the house. By early morning, the signals had moved to a remote wooded area in suburban Dallas. Shortly after, the signals vanished. A few days later, Lisa briefly responded to messages on her secondary work phone, but it soon became unreachable as well. Using geolocation data from the mobile devices, authorities reconstructed the group's route that night, identifying the stops they made along the way. This information led them to suspect that the missing student's body might have been disposed of in this area. Although this narrowed down the search radius, the area was vast and challenging to navigate, hindering the progress of the investigation. The search for the missing Seattle student was suspended near the new year, as no body or clues were found. However, in March 2021, a local hunter discovered a human skull in the woods that appeared to be relatively recent. The hunter immediately reported the find to the police, who then sent the remains to a forensic laboratory for examination. Dental records confirmed that the remains belonged to the missing student, who had been gone for nearly 6 months. Although the body was badly decomposed and damaged by wild animals, making it impossible to determine the exact cause of death, forensic analysis revealed characteristic marks on the bones that suggested knife wounds. However, it was unclear whether these wounds were fatal. After the authorities found the body in the forest, they quickly identified the first suspects and tracked down Lisa, who had moved to Florida with her partner, Na. They had rented a house in Miami near the ocean. However, when the police arrived, only Na was apprehended, while Lisa went into hiding after learning about the situation. Charles, another suspect, was nowhere to be found, although he occasionally contacted his former girlfriends through messaging apps. In one of his last messages, Charles warned his acquaintances that the police were closing in and that they should be extremely careful. Meanwhile, Na, who was now in custody, denied any involvement in Marcella's disappearance, claiming she knew nothing about what had happened to her. Lisa, on the other hand, used her connections to try to hire a good lawyer for Na. While in Florida, Na attempted to sell her house in South Carolina as quickly as possible, likely to raise funds for their continued hiding or to flee the country. Authorities eventually tracked down Lisa and arrested her, and both women were taken back to Dallas. During initial questioning, neither woman provided any information, and their bail was set at $500,000 each. They were able to post bail and were released to house arrest, but were required to wear tracking devices that allowed authorities to monitor their movements. In August of the same year, Charles made a daring escape attempt, but police were hot on his trail and tracked him down to Utah, where he was hiding at the home of a former girlfriend. She, who had a 5-year-old son with Charles, was overjoyed to see him and didn't ask questions about his sudden return. When Charles was arrested, he initially refused to cooperate with the police or answer their questions. He was counting on his wealthy lover to use her influence and wealth to hire a top-notch lawyer to get him out of trouble. However, things took a dramatic turn on Christmas Eve in 2021. Lisa and Nina, who had been released on bail, suddenly went dark when their tracking bracelet stopped working due to the holiday chaos and high activity. The police didn't send a team to the suspect's location until the next day, but by then, they had already vanished. It was later discovered that the suspects had been carefully planning their escape for months. As a result, by the time the police pursued them, they had already crossed the border into Mexico undetected. From Mexico, they traveled to South Korea by air, and their trail eventually went cold in Cambodia. The FBI teamed up with the Cambodian police and immigration authorities to locate the suspects on the run. They women first raised suspicions after making a large cash withdrawal from an ATM, prompting authorities to monitor their movements. They tried to pay for everything in cash to stay under the radar, but security footage helped reveal their whereabouts. An ATM camera identified the fugitives, and another camera caught the license plate of the vehicle they arrived in. The vehicle's owner cooperated with police and took them to the residence where the foreign women were living extravagantly. They were recaptured in February 2022 and sent back to the United States, where they were taken into custody without the possibility of bail, ensuring they went directly to jail to face the law. Charles realized that his lover was only looking out for herself and had no intention of helping him avoid prison. This led him to decide to cooperate with the investigation and share information. His detailed account of the events that took place that night shocked many. Bellin admitted to being in a romantic relationship with Lisa, the homeowner, and her spouse, Na, but claimed it was motivated by financial gain and a desire to further his music career. He did not have genuine feelings for these women and instead often pursued younger, attractive women, openly engaging in numerous affairs. On October 5, 2020, Chuck met Maricela, a young student, at a nightclub. They spent the evening drinking and dancing together, and he eventually invited her back to his place. Maricela agreed, and when they arrived, Chuck's roommates, Na and Lisa, were already asleep. Chuck and Maricela went to his room, where they engaged in intimate activities and fell asleep. Later that night, Lisa woke up and entered Chuck's room, where she saw Maricela sleeping next to him. This triggered a jealous outburst, and Lisa went to the kitchen to grab a large knife. She then returned to Chuck's room and attacked Maricela, repeatedly striking her with the knife. Charles reported that he was woken up by a noise and was initially disoriented due to intoxication. When he turned on the light, he was met with a disturbing scene. Morella's body had fallen to the floor beside the bed, where she had lost a significant amount of blood. Na entered the room, and both Charles and Na stood there for a few minutes, failing to provide any assistance to the victim. Once Charles regained his composure, he realized that he might be blamed for the crime due to his prior record, and that his influential acquaintances might avoid punishment. He claimed that this is why he agreed to help dispose of the body and conceal the crime. Charles stayed with friends for several days and, upon returning to collect his belongings, noticed that the blood stains on the floor and carpet had almost completely disappeared. Lisa informed him that she and Na had taken care of everything and destroyed the evidence of the crime. The three individuals involved decided it was best to leave town for a while and observe from a distance what would happen next. Lisa Dykebell's defense team argued that she had no motive to harm she. According to her lawyer, Lisa's relationship with Chuck was purely professional, and she saw his music career as a valuable investment. She claimed that his personal relationships and interactions with others did not concern her. A key point made by her defense was that Lisa had recently gotten married to Moran and was happy in her relationship. However, it was unclear why she and her wife had decided to take the surname of their young lodger, Charles, after their wedding, despite claiming he was insignificant to them. During the trial, Lisa portrayed Charles as hot-tempered and cruel, especially when intoxicated, and stated that she feared him. Lisa's account of the events that night claims that Chuck brought a new woman home from the club, but their encounter turned violent when an argument broke out. Chuck allegedly grabbed a knife in a fit of rage. Lisa and Nina intervened, trying to separate but it was too late. Maricela was already dead. Chuck then coerced Lisa and Nina into helping him dispose of the body and clean up the crime scene, threatening to harm them if they didn't comply. However, a witness who testified in court, a friend of Lisa's, painted a different picture. According to the friend, Lisa was intensely fixated on Chuck and had often expressed a desire to get rid of any woman who got close to him. The friend suggested that Lisa's emotions got the better of her that night. The friend also mentioned a peculiar detail, a statue of Santa Muerte in Lisa's home, which was part of an improvised altar. Lisa had jokingly told her friend that she was into black magic and knew how to cast a spell to make a man loyal only to her. The ritual apparently did not work as planned, and she turned to using a knife instead. A real estate agent who was approached by the women shortly after the incident testified that they were desperate to sell several properties they owned as quickly as possible. They also wanted to put their home in Dallas up for sale, but were unable to do so while the investigation was ongoing because the house was a crime scene. The situation took a turn for the worse when the remains of she were found. At this point, Lisa and Nina were willing to sell the property at a significantly reduced price, just to get the money quickly. During the trial, the court considered Charles's full confession and his cooperation with the investigation. However, things took a turn for the worse for the fugitives after they attempted to flee to another continent. In March 2023, Lisa Dyke Beltran was convicted of a heinous crime against 23-year-old Maricela, as well as tampering with evidence and attempting to escape. She received a life sentence with no possibility of parole. Charles Beltran and Nina Morin, on the other hand, pleaded guilty and cooperated with the investigation. They were found guilty of concealing evidence. Nina received a 7-year prison sentence, but may be eligible for release in 3 years if she exhibits good behavior. Charles, who had prior convictions, was sentenced to 12 years in prison with the possibility of parole after serving 8 years. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Linda Sladen. Linda Patterson Sladen was born on March 8, 1950. At 16, she became pregnant with her first son, Jeff, and 3 years later, her second son, Tim. To build a stable family, she convinced her boyfriend, Frank Sladen, to marry her. Unfortunately, the marriage turned out to be disastrous. Frank's alcoholism addiction led to routine abuse of Linda and their sons. Jeff and Tim remember their father's violent behavior, which was triggered by his drinking. The abuse was so severe that Linda considered divorce, and in 1974, she finally escaped the toxic marriage. After 9 tumultuous years, Linda divorced Frank and started a new life as a single mother to her 2 teenage sons. Despite financial struggles and limited resources, she worked hard to provide for her family and be a caring presence in her sons' lives. Without a car, Jeff and Tim often walked to school or relied on others for rides. Jeff and Tim loved playing football, but they didn't have a ride to practice, so their coach, Coach Joseph, would often give them a lift to and from their home. Around the same time, Linda was preparing her home for her mother's visit. She wanted her mother to move in, hoping her presence would help tidy up the house and make it feel more welcoming. Linda's sister Judy would often visit her, and they would spend their time chatting over coffee. However, on September 4, 1981, Judy arrived at Linda's apartment around 8:30 a.m. to find something shocking. The night before, on September 3, 1981, Jeff had come home from football practice to find no food, so he went to his grandparents' place. He returned home around 9:30 p.m. to find the house empty. Later, around 11:30 p.m., Linda and her younger son Tim came home. Linda had been at a neighbor's place playing cards, and before that, she had done some household chores. Jeff saw his mom doing the dishes while Tim went to bed. Jeff apologized to his mom for their earlier argument, and they made up before Linda said goodnight to her boys. Jeff's last words to his mother were, "I love you, Mom, I'll see you tomorrow," but tragically, that would be the last conversation they would ever have. On September 4, 1981, at around 8:30 a.m., Judy visited Linda's apartment. When she knocked on Linda's bedroom door, there was no response. This was unusual, as Linda typically woke up before the boys left for school. Judy thought maybe Linda was still asleep, but as she turned to leave, she noticed something odd. The window in Linda's room was open, and the sheet that usually covered it was missing. Judy's concern grew, and she knocked on the door again. This time, she opened it and was met with a horrific sight: Linda's lifeless body on the floor, a wire clothes hanger wrapped around her neck. Linda was partially undressed, and her cupboard was wide open, but there were no signs of a struggle. Everything else in the room was in its usual place. Judy's scream alerted a nearby caretaker, who immediately called 911. Within minutes, the police, news reporters, and medical services arrived at the scene. The area was quickly cordoned off. Tim and Jeff were abruptly awakened by police officers, who then asked them to leave their home, which had become a crime scene. Jeff managed to avoid seeing his lifeless mother by passing by her room quickly, but Tim caught a glimpse of her for the last time. The 2 boys were subsequently sent to live with their grandparents while the investigation continued. Tragically, their mother, Linda, had been murdered at the age of 31. As soon as the boys had left, Sergeant Edgar Pickett of the Lakeland Police Department arrived at the crime scene to take charge of the case. He played a crucial role in the investigation and discovered vital evidence. Upon beginning his examination of the scene, Sergeant Pickett found several fingerprints in Linda's bedroom. While most belonged to the victim, one print did not match Linda's appeared. A palm print was discovered on the windowsill of Linda Slayton's bedroom, the same window that was missing a sheet, sparking an investigation into her death. An autopsy revealed multiple bruises and marks on her arms, shoulders, and neck, and her partially naked body suggested possible sexual assault. The autopsy results confirmed that Linda was brutally beaten, sexually assaulted, and then strangled to death with a metal clothes hanger from her own closet. The palm print found on the windowsill was a crucial piece of evidence, but unfortunately, forensic DNA analysis was not available at the time. As a result, the police had to explore Linda's family tree to identify potential suspects. The primary suspect was Frank Slayton, Linda's ex-husband, who had a history of aggression and abuse. In 1975, during their divorce, Linda described Frank as having an aggressive nature and being neglectful of his family. He was brought in for questioning, but an alibi checked out, placing him at home in Alabama on the night of Linda's murder. The police also had other individuals in mind. One of them was Jeff Slayton, Linda's son. The reason for this was a heated argument between Jeff and his mother that occurred before her murder. As the eldest son, Jeff had a complex relationship with his mother, having grown up in a household with an abusive father and later a single mother. Although Jeff and his mother frequently argued, they always managed to make amends. On the night of the murder, Jeff had made up with his mother before going to bed. When questioned by the police, Jeff passed 2 polygraph tests, which led to his name being cleared from the list of suspects. By September 2001, the police were struggling to find new leads in the case, nearly a year after the murder. However, things took a turn when they received information about a 24-year-old man who was reportedly involved in a similar crime, reigniting their investigation. Jimmy Ulmer was a suspect in Linda's murder case due to a previous crime where he attempted to abduct a 10-year-old girl through her bedroom window. A police check revealed that Ulmer had received an 80-year prison sentence, and his crimes bore a striking resemblance to Linda's case. Furthermore, Ulmer had been living in the same apartment complex as Linda at the time of the murder. The evidence against him made Ulmer the prime suspect, but he died during the investigation, making a DNA match impossible without exhuming his body. Fortunately, Ulmer's mother allowed the authorities to collect a DNA sample from him, but the results did not match. With Ulmer ruled out, the investigation turned to other potential suspects, but no one was ever charged. Despite looking into other leads, the case eventually went cold. The Slayton brothers, Linda's children, were now left to cope with the loss of their mother, relying solely on their grandparents, Clarence and Margaret Harris, for support. After Linda passed away, her family held a funeral and gradually returned to their normal routines. Her sons went back to school, and as time went by, they began to heal and move on from what had happened. Tim eventually started playing football again, and he found comfort in the support of his teammates and coach Joseph, who would often give him rides to and from practice. Tim put up a photo of his team in his bedroom, which became a source of motivation for him to keep moving forward and overcome his challenges. After their mother's death, the young Slayton brothers grew into men who built loving families of their own. Jeff got married and had 2 children, while Tim also started a family. As the years passed, both brothers regularly checked in with the Lakeland investigators to see if there were any updates on their mother's case. By 1998, Sergeant Edgar Pickett had left the case, and a new investigation team took over. Detective Brad Grace was assigned to the Slayton case and began reviewing the evidence. He discovered unidentified DNA from the 1981 crime scene and sent it to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement's Major Crime Lab for analysis. By 1999, the lab had successfully developed a full DNA profile of the killer. In 2001, Detective Grace reviewed the list of suspects in the Slayton case, determined to collect DNA samples from each one. He arranged a meeting with the Slayton brothers and collected their DNA samples, which were sent for further testing. However, the results revealed no match with the DNA profile of the suspected murderer. After clearing Jeff's name, Detective Grace turned his attention to Frank Slayton. Frank had since quit drinking and appeared to have overcome his aggressive tendencies, even reconnecting with his sons, Tim and Jeff. Frank agreed to submit his DNA for testing, but it did not match the DNA profile. Detective Grace attempted to find a match for the unidentified DNA profile by submitting it to the FBI's National DNA Database in 2005. Over the years, he eliminated dozens of suspects through DNA evidence, but he retired in 2015 after 17 years on the case. The case was then assigned to new detectives, Tommy Hathcock and Russell Hurley. Detective Tommy made a significant breakthrough in the investigation 3 years in, when they discovered that the Florida Department of Law Enforcement had developed a cutting-edge technology that could help identify unidentifiable DNA. She immediately sent the unidentified DNA from the Slayton case to a genetic genealogist, who uploaded it to a public genealogy website called GeneMatch. The website, run by Moore, produced a list of people who shared DNA with the killer. Moore then used birth certificates, marriage certificates, obituaries, and social media to build a genetic family tree. As she dug deeper, she created 3 branches of the family tree that led to a single individual who was likely responsible for Linda Slayton's murder. The DNA profile and family tree pointed to one person, Joseph Clinton Mills, also known as Coach Joseph. In a shocking twist, it turned out that Joseph was a familiar face to the Slayton family. His picture even hung on Tim's bedroom wall, with Joseph standing just above Tim's shoulder. Upon learning the killer's name, detectives Tommy and Russell began investigating Joseph Mills' background. They uncovered a history of crimes, including grand theft committed through forging a will. Although Joseph was never charged for this crime, the police had collected his palm and fingerprints. Significantly, a palm print matching Joseph was found on the windowsill at the crime scene by Sergeant Edgar Pickett. The family of the deceased might finally find closure in a cold case that had been open for over 40 years. To confirm their suspicions, investigators compared the palm prints taken from Linda Slayton's windowsill in 1981 to the suspect's palm print and found a match. However, they still needed to compare a recent DNA sample from the suspect to the DNA evidence from the Slayton case. To do this without alerting the suspect, detectives decided to obtain his DNA for testing without his knowledge. To gather evidence, investigators took garbage bags from Joseph Mills's house and searched them at the police station for items that could contain his DNA. While sorting through the trash, they found a piece of medical adhesive tape in one of the bags and sent it to the crime lab for testing. As they awaited the DNA results, the detectives looked into Joseph's private life. He was a 58-year-old married man with children and grandchildren who had spent most of his life in Kathleen, Florida, just 30 minutes from the crime scene. 2 weeks later, the crime lab results came in, revealing that the unknown DNA found at the scene matched the DNA on the medical adhesive tape. In December 2019, detectives arrested Joseph and brought him in for questioning. It was discovered that Joseph was only around 20 years old when he committed the crime in 1981. Police had spoken to him over the phone just a day after the murder, but Joseph had told investigators that he had dropped the victim off after football practice on the night of September 3, 1981, the evening before the murder. The police did not initially suspect Joseph, but he eventually became a person of interest. During questioning, Joseph claimed that Linda Slayton had invited him over for consensual sex. However, investigators thought this was a fabricated story. They suspected that Joseph had actually targeted Linda before the night of the murder, partly because he had frequently given her son, Tim, rides to and from football practice, and also because he had been seen lingering around the Slaytons' residence. According to Joseph's statement, on the night of September 3, 1981, after dropping Tim off at his house after football practice, Joseph returned to the Slaytons' residence when no one was home. He broke in through Linda's bedroom window and hid in her closet until she went to bed. Once she was asleep, Joseph emerged from the closet, beat, sexually assaulted, and ultimately strangled Linda using a wire hanger from her closet. Joseph Mills was found guilty of first-degree murder and sexual battery. During his sentencing, family members of the victim, Linda Slayton, confronted him and demanded to know why he committed the crime. However, Joseph failed to provide any explanation or apology, simply stating, "I am a good person." The judge sentenced Joseph to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Although the Slayton family found some comfort in knowing that Joseph will spend the rest of his life behind bars, they were still outraged that he was able to live freely for so many years while they suffered without their mother. Tim, Linda's son, was particularly shocked by the revelation. Joseph had been a role model and coach to him, and Tim had looked up to him. However, it turned out that Joseph had been playing a sinister game. He would often ask Tim about the progress of the case, pretending to show concern, while secretly trying to gather information and avoid suspicion. Joseph would ask about new leads and news, but Tim had no idea that the killer was standing right in front of him. Even today, Tim does not believe that the person he trusted most was actually his mother's killer. In fact, he says he had the killer's picture in his home for years without ever suspecting anything. Jeff, still grieving, often wonders how life would be different if Linda were still alive. Despite the traumatic experience, Tim and Jeff have remained very close. They often visit their mother's grave together, and Jeff never fails to light a candle on the anniversary of her death. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Donald Harvey. Donald Harvey was born on April 15, 1952, in Hamilton, Ohio, to Ray and Goldie Donald. He was the oldest of 3 children and was affectionately known as Donnie by his parents. Following his birth, the family relocated to Boonville, Kentucky, a small community in the Appalachian Mountains. Despite struggling with poverty, they was loving and nurturing to their children. However, their marriage began to deteriorate due to their economic struggles. As a child, Donald was quiet and mostly kept to himself, showing no apparent signs of abnormality. However, he suffered a traumatic past, being sexually abused and assaulted by at least 3 men. The perpetrators included his uncle on his mother's side, who molested him during visits to his grandmother's home, and an older neighbor who offered him money for sexual favors. Additionally, at the age of 18, Donald claimed to have been sexually assaulted by his roommate, Randy White. While a traumatic past can contribute to the development of psychological issues, Donald was often perceived as a loner in school. He preferred to focus on his studies and rarely participated in extracurricular activities, opting to read instead. Although this helped him earn good grades, it also led to teasing and the label of teacher's pet. After graduating from Sturgeon Elementary School, Donald enrolled in Boonville High School in 1968. Despite his good academic record, he soon found himself bored with the daily routine and decided to drop out. However, he eventually earned his diploma through a correspondence school in Chicago and received his general education development at the age of 16. With no clear future plans, Donald struggled to figure out his life's direction. He eventually moved to Cincinnati, Ohio, where he landed a job at a local factory. However, when the factory closed down in 1970, Donald lost his job and was left uncertain about his future. Around that time, his mother called and asked him to visit his ailing grandfather, who was in Marymount Hospital in London, Kentucky. Donald agreed to the visit. During his daily visits to see his ailing grandfather, Donald formed strong relationships with the hospital workers, who grew to genuinely like him. Their admiration for him led to an unexpected job offer. Although it is unclear what motivated Donald to want to work as a nurse's aide, some speculate that he needed to earn a living after losing his previous job. Despite lacking formal training in nursing or medicine, the hospital staff entrusted him with responsibilities. Donald's job at the hospital involved caring for patients on his own, including tasks like changing bedpans, inserting catheters, and giving medications. Despite the challenges, Donald's early weeks at the hospital passed without incident. However, on the evening of May 31, 1970, Donald was attending to 88-year-old stroke patient Logan Evans in a private room. Suddenly, Evans rubbed his own feces on Donald's face. While it's likely Evans wasn't fully aware of his actions due to the effects of his stroke, the incident triggered something within Donald, leading him to completely lose control. Without realizing what he was doing, Donald suffocated Evans with a blue plastic bag and a pillow until the patient was motionless. He then checked Evans' pulse with a stethoscope to confirm his death. Following the killing, Donald disposed of the plastic bag, cleaned Evans' body, dressed him in a fresh gown, and showered him before notifying the nurses about the patient's passing. After the first incident, no one suspected anything out of the ordinary. Donald went to cover the patient with a sheet, but instead, he used his hand to smother him to death. It was surprising that he was able to do this without anyone noticing, especially since he used a pillow to kill him. The next day, Donald was assigned to care for another elderly patient, 69-year-old James Tyree. He made a critical mistake by using the wrong size catheter on him. When James realized what was happening, he yelled at Donald to remove it. Donald used his hand to restrain him, which caused him to vomit blood and eventually die from an air embolism. Once again, no one suspected foul play. With no one suspecting him of any wrongdoing after his first two murders, he became more confident and careless. Just 3 weeks after the first murder, Donald deliberately cut off the oxygen tank of 42-year-old patient Elizabeth Wyatt. He later claimed that he had ended her suffering, as she had expressed a desire to die. A nurse found Elizabeth dead 4 hours later, but no one questioned Donald about her death. Over the next 10 months, he took advantage of the lack of suspicion and killed 15 more patients under his care. He saw this as an opportunity to indulge his darker impulses, and he continued to kill without being detected. Donald's methods of murder varied widely, driven by a desire for pleasure or experimentation. He would often use smothering, sabotage oxygen tanks, inject lethal drugs, or overdose patients with medication. When angered, his methods became even more brutal. On one occasion, he inserted a coat hanger through a patient's catheter after an argument, puncturing the patient's bladder and bowel, which led to infection and death a few days later. Despite the brutality of his actions, Donald considered himself a mercy killer, the self-proclaimed angel of death who was playing God with vulnerable patients. He cloaked his horrific deeds in a mask of kindness, believing that his actions were somehow merciful. On March 31, 1971, the day he was arrested for burglary while drunk, Donald's life took a turn. In his incoherent confession, he revealed his dark secret to the police, but no one took him seriously. As a result, he faced only charges of petty theft and paid a fine instead of serving prison time. This close call prompted Donald to attempt to turn his life around. For a few months, he tried to regain stability and eventually landed a part-time job as a nurse's aide at Cardinal Hill Hospital in Lexington. In June 1973, Donald started a second nursing job at Good Samaritan Hospital in Lexington. He held both nursing positions simultaneously before eventually moving on. Between August 1974 and September 1975, he took on 2 non-nursing roles, a telephone operator in Lexington and a clerk at St. Luke's Hospital in Fort Thomas, Kentucky. Notably, Donald was able to resist his urge to kill during this period. A possible explanation is that he had limited access to patients in these new roles, which may have also contributed to his decision to change jobs frequently. Donald's struggle to control his killing urges eventually became too much to manage, leading him to relocate to Cincinnati, Ohio in September 1975. He found employment at the Cincinnati VA Medical Hospital, working various roles including nursing assistant, housekeeping aide, and autopsy assistant. The hospital's night shift schedule and lack of supervision gave him unrestricted access to all areas of the hospital. Over the next decade, Donald murdered at least 15 patients while working at the hospital. He meticulously documented each crime in a diary, detailing the methods he used to kill his victims. These methods included poisoning patients' food and drinks, suffocating them with plastic bags and towels, and injecting them with lethal substances. Donald's experimentation with different methods was influenced by his study of medical journals, which he used to refine his techniques and avoid detection. Donald preferred cyanide as his method of murder, which he mixed into patients' food or administered through their gastric tubes. He accumulated a large stash of cyanide, approximately 30 pounds, which he stole from the hospital over time and kept at home for safekeeping. He stated that he began using morphine to kill patients in the 1970s, particularly in small hospitals in Kentucky where it was not heavily regulated. He also mentioned he used other methods, such as cyanide, arsenic, adhesive cleaner, and suffocation with a plastic bag. Despite the numerous deaths, he claimed to have avoided suspicion by making them appear accidental or due to natural causes. He revealed that in reality, he was a serial killer hiding in plain sight, preying on vulnerable patients. He took it upon himself to decide who lived or died, often without the patients' or their families' consent. He justified his actions as merciful, but he acknowledged that the truth was more complex. While he claimed that his crimes were motivated by compassion, other evidence suggested otherwise. He recounted that a turning point came in the early 1980s when his behavior became more erratic and driven by rage. He started dating a man named Doug Hill, but their relationship was tumultuous. After a heated argument, he poisoned Doug's ice cream with arsenic, and fortunately, Doug survived. This incident marked the first time he tried to harm someone outside of the hospital, revealing a darker side to his nature. Donald's behavior took a dark turn after a fight with Carl Heller. He moved in with Carl Heller, but the relationship quickly became toxic. Donald's jealousy and paranoia led him to suspect Heller of cheating, and he started lacing Carl's food with arsenic to keep her from leaving. As time passed, Donald's cruel actions extended beyond his home. He poisoned a female neighbor's drink with hepatitis serum during an argument, and she almost died before receiving treatment. Unfortunately, another neighbor, Helen Metzger, was not as fortunate. Donald poisoned one of her pies with arsenic, which ultimately led to her death. Donald's lack of consequences for his crimes emboldened him, and he became more confident and reckless. He felt like he was above the law, having gotten away with multiple murders. In April 1983, Donald's behavior escalated. After a disagreement with Heller's parents, he began secretly poisoning their food with small doses of arsenic. The following month, Carl's father, Henry, suffered a stroke and was hospitalized. During a visit, Donald saw an opportunity to strike again and laced Henry's pudding with arsenic. Henry died that night. Over the next year, Donald continued to target Carl's mother, Margaret, periodically poisoning her in an attempt to kill her. In January 1984, Donald's relationship with his partner, Carl, ended, and he was asked to leave their home. Donald reacted poorly to the breakup and spent the next 2 years trying to harm Carl using poison. He also attempted to kill one of Carl's female friends in a separate incident, but was unsuccessful. Although Donald did manage to hospitalize Carl at one point, his attempts to kill her ultimately failed. Donald's behavior raised suspicions on July 18, 1985, when security guards at his workplace discovered a suspicious collection of items in his gym bag. The contents included a gun, hypodermic needles, surgical scissors, gloves, a cocaine spoon, medical texts, occult books, and a biography of serial killer Charles Sobridge. As a result of the discovery, Donald was fined $50 for carrying a firearm on federal property and given the option to resign from his job quietly. Surprisingly, the incident was not documented in his work record, and the hospital did not investigate Donald for potential involvement in other crimes during his employment. He was able to secure a new job as a part-time nurse's aide at Drake Memorial Hospital in Cincinnati just 7 months later, in February 1986. Donald Harvey's new employers were impressed by his work and soon offered him a full-time position at the hospital. Unbeknownst to them, Donald had a dark past, and he quickly fell back into his old routine. Over the next 13 months, he murdered 26 more patients and attempted to kill several others by tampering with their life support machines, injecting them with lethal substances, and suffocating them. The murder spree finally came to an end on March 7, 1987, with the death of 44-year-old John Powell. Powell had been recovering from a motorcycle accident, but his sudden and mysterious death raised suspicions. Due to Ohio's law requiring an autopsy in cases of vehicular homicide, the authorities were able to investigate Powell's death. During the autopsy, the assistant coroner detected a faint scent of almonds, a sign of cyanide poisoning. This discovery led the authorities to launch an investigation into Powell's death. Initially, they suspected Powell's friends and family, but they found no evidence or motive. The focus then shifted to hospital employees who had access to Powell's room, and Donald Harvey was one of the individuals they needed to rule out. Hospital employees were voluntarily taking polygraph tests to clear their names. Donald Harvey also was offered to take a test, but he didn't follow through. Instead, he called in sick on the day of his scheduled test. He had even purchased a book on how to cheat on lie detector tests. This raised suspicions, especially when investigators discovered his notorious nickname, Angel of Death, and learned about his questionable partner from the hospital. As the investigation continued, authorities focused on Donald due to the unusual number of deaths surrounding him. During questioning, Donald initially denied any involvement in John Powell's murder, claiming he was just a victim of circumstance. However, after hours of interrogation, he eventually confessed to putting cyanide in Powell's feeding tube. He claimed he did it out of sympathy for Powell and his family, but denied responsibility for the other suspicious deaths. Donald was taken into custody, and investigators began searching for more evidence. On August 11, 1987, Donald, then 35, confessed to committing 33 murders over the past 17 years. As the investigation continued, the number of murders he confessed to grew to 70. Donald's claims of multiple murders raised suspicions among investigators, who questioned the accuracy of the numbers he provided. To verify his credibility, they ordered a series of psychiatric evaluations by multiple experts. The tests concluded that Donald was sane and competent, able to distinguish right from wrong and conform to the law. In 1987, Donald was sentenced to 8 life terms plus 20 years for the murders committed at Mary's Mount Hospital. The following year, he pleaded guilty to 3 additional murders and 3 attempted murders in Cincinnati, receiving 3 life sentences and 3 terms of 7 to 25 years. After a 2-year investigation, the remaining cases were closed due to insufficient evidence linking Donald to the crimes. The public was both shocked by Donald's actions, and many wondered what drove him to commit such heinous crimes. In a 1991 interview with the Columbus Dispatch, Donald revealed that his motivation stemmed from a desire for control. He felt that others had controlled him for 18 years, and he sought to reclaim power over his own life. Donald admitted that he enjoyed the sense of power that came with deciding who lived or died. Donald Harvey is one of the most notorious serial killers in U.S. history, not only due to the high number of victims, but also because he targeted people he knew personally, including his patients. An Associated Press article from 2001 listed him as the worst serial killer in the United States. Contrary to expectations that Donald would spend the rest of his life in prison and die of natural causes, his life took a different turn. On March 28, 2017, Donald was found severely beaten in his cell at the Toledo Correctional Institution, where he was being held in protective custody. He died 2 days later from severe head injuries. Months later, an inmate named James Elliott confessed to the crime in a letter to the Toledo Blade. James, who was serving a 37-year sentence for multiple burglaries, claimed that he had committed the murder to bring closure to the families of Donald's victims, who were from his hometown in Kentucky. In his letter, James wrote that he hoped his actions would bring some solace to the victims' families, as Donald had not received the punishment he deserved from the courts. In September 2019, James was sentenced to life in prison after pleading guilty to the murder of the notorious Angel of Death.